Han Li's Wuxia Adventures. Chapter 3266. Mu Ro Yen was flustered and exasperated. Mother, did I say something wrong? She just couldn't stand it. What right did they have to come so early in the morning and wait here to welcome this country bumpkin? Why did even his grandmother treat this village woman differently? She was also grandmother's biological granddaughter, okay? Why did she have to give way to this village woman who hadn't returned home for more than 10 years? Ro Yen, how can you be so rude to the crown princess? A gloomy reprimand came from behind the crowd. The second branch's Madame Chiu secretly smiled and used a handkerchief to wipe the corners of her mouth. She coldly watched the first branch's group of muddle-headed people making a ruckus in front of old Madame. What did they think that this ruckus would benefit the first branch? Didn't it just cause old Madame to despise them even more? Madame Chiu exchanged a glance with her daughter without batting an eyelid. She smiled and looked away. Following the sound of wheels, Shi Huixin, who was sitting in a wheelchair with a very gloomy expression, arrived. Concubine Shi had a green handkerchief tied around her head and combed all her hair inside. Her eyes were like the eyes of a poisonous snake, containing a bit of frightening moist coldness as she stared fixedly at her. Don't forget what kind of price you have to pay to offend the crown princess, Concubine Shi said coldly. I'm your example. I still have to thank the crown princess for not killing me. She saved this lowly concubine's life. It's just that I'm crippled. When Concubine Shi said the last 4 words, she gritted her teeth as if she was chewing on Arbor's flesh. Of course, if it was possible, Concubine Shi would have pounced on her and torn her apart. Sir Jojo glanced at her and said coldly, "Men." Old Madame's eyelids twitched slightly, and a bad premonition arose in her heart. Stay Up Late jumped in front of Sir Jojo with a whoosh. He secretly suppressed the twitching corners of his mouth and bowed. This subordinate is here. A mere lowly concubine dares to be sarcastic in front of this crown princess. She's simply bold and presumptuous. Kill her. Everyone was dumbfounded. Shi Huixin's face was slightly distorted. She was also shocked in her heart. Cold sweat involuntarily dripped down her face. Seeing that Aoyi was about to make a move, Chiu Shi of the second branch pursed her lips and couldn't help but smile and lower her eyes. The first branch really had a wonderful show every day, one after another. It was just a matter of which one was better. You. Mu Ro Yen shrieked. You dare, shut up. Mu Qingya saw that things were going in a strange direction and hurriedly scolded the concubine's daughter who only knew how to scream. She glared at Shi Huixin and her daughter mercilessly. He clearly knew that the little crown princess was someone who never played by the rules, so why did he have to rush over to find trouble with her? Did they really think that the little crown princess, who had just returned from studying at the royal school, would be kinder than before? This pair of brainless mother and daughter were simply looking for trouble. Mu Qingya took a deep breath and hurriedly reached out to block Stay Up Late. She smiled apologetically at Arbor. Jojo, ever since Concubine Shi's legs became inconvenient, her brain has also become muddled. Don't be calculative with her. The little crown princess looked coldly at Shi Huixin. I don't think she's muddled. She just hates this crown princess. Since she doesn't want to live such a good life, then let her die. Chapter 3267. Mu Qingya's pupils constricted as she glanced at old Madame. However, old Madame was looking straight ahead as if she hadn't heard what the crown princess said. She didn't say anything or stop her. Mu Qingya felt a little depressed. Old Madame was clearly showing that she didn't care about anything. With old Madame's status, as long as she said something, the crown princess might give her some face. However, old Madame didn't say anything. Mu Qingya glanced at the pale-faced Shi Huixin and couldn't help but curse in her heart. Now, she knew to be afraid. She didn't have her way before, but now, she had a loose tongue. Aoyi raised his arm in front of Mu Qingya. Madame Mu, please make way. Mu Qingya took a deep breath and hurriedly said, Jojo, your grandfather's birthday is around the corner. It's not good for a bloody disaster to happen. Concubine sure. Mu Qingya shouted sternly, get over here and apologize to the crown princess. Shi Huixin trembled, unable to suppress her anger. What did I say? Concubine Shi suppressed her surging anger and said with forbearance, this concubine is only grateful to the crown prince consort for not killing me, grateful to the crown prince consort for sparing this concubine's lowly life. How am I speaking without reason? The little crown princess glanced at her coldly and said rudely, I never thought of sparing your life. First, you found someone to impersonate me and tried to ruin my reputation. You made me a rat that everyone despises. Arbor looked at her coldly and said, then, you sent a few servants to disgust His Highness and me. Your actions are still vivid in my mind. Why should I let you off? I wanted to beat you to death that day. You were lucky to have escaped this disaster. How dare you be so arrogant in front of me instead of staying in your rat hole? Do you think that I, the crown princess, can't deal with a lowly servant like you? Ao Ye's heart skipped a beat. He hurriedly cupped his hands and shouted, Crown Princess, please calm down. Saishio. Your servant is here. Give her a piece of white silk, a dagger, and a bottle of poison. Let her choose. When Xiao Mu said this coldly, the scene instantly turned silent. Even Madame Nei Chio's eyelids couldn't resist twitching. She thought that the first madam of the Mu family's first branch could protect that lowly concubine. It turned out that in front of the crown princess, the first madam could only suffer. Kai Xiu walked up with a solemn face and directly threw the 3 items that the crown prince consort had mentioned in front of Shi Huixin. She coldly said, Concubine Shi, the crown prince consort grants you death. Do you want to do it yourself, or do you want me to help you? Shi Huixin's chest trembled, and she couldn't help but let out an ear-piercing scream, how dare you? You dare. You're really lawless. What is the ancestral law in your eyes? I, the crown princess, grant you death as a lowly concubine. I really don't need any laws. Arbor looked at her coldly. She had completely lost her patience with this person. Concubine Shi had never been humiliated like this. She was so angry that she sat paralyzed in her wheelchair, trembling uncontrollably. Mu Ro Yen was also about to go crazy. She rushed forward and waved her fist. How dare you treat my mother like this? I'll kill Ah. A strong and agile female servant quickly came out from the old madam's side. Without saying a word, she pulled and twisted the second Mrs. arm and pinned it behind her back with one hand. Mu Ro Yen felt that the other party's strength was so strong that it seemed like she was going to break her arm. It was so painful that cold sweat broke out on her forehead. Chapter 3268. Without another word, Kai Xiu had already kicked up the white silk on the ground and walked over with Kai Chi. The white silk was about to wrap around Concubine Shi's neck. Concubine Shi's entire body suddenly erupted with power. Kai Xiu and Kai Chi were only level 8 or level 9 mystic cultivators, so they naturally couldn't withstand this sudden burst of spiritual power. Seeing that this spiritual power was about to land on them, Ao Yi flew forward and punched. The ferocious power collided head-on with the incoming spiritual power. Without any suspense, Concubine Shi screamed and flew out with her wheelchair. She fell to the ground with a thud and couldn't get up for a long time. Kai Xiu knitted her brows and exchanged glances with Kai Chi. The two quickly walked forward and wrapped the white silk around her neck twice. Seeing those two servant girls expressionlessly tightening their grip on the white silk, Shi Huixin's face instantly turned ashen. Her spiritual power was currently being suppressed by that black-clothed young imperial guard, so she couldn't even use half of it. Could it be that she was going to watch helplessly as she was hanged to death in such a cowardly manner? Arbor coldly glanced at her and said in a seemingly nonchalant manner, still not sending a message to Shantian Prefecture. You're about to die. If you die, you won't have a chance to ask Prefecture Lord Gung for help. Shi Huixin's eyes flickered, but she didn't speak. Seeing Shi Huixin's guilty expression, could it be that she really knew Shantian Prefecture's Prefecture Lord, Gung Pengcheng? Seeing that she didn't seem to be faking it, Arbor couldn't help but frown. Should he just deal with her like this? This woman really did seem to have some small secrets on her. Could it be that the old rival who had been contacting Shantian Prefecture's Prefecture Lord, who had been chasing after Sir Jojo for years, was really this Shi Huixin? But seeing how she had previously accepted Xiao Yingchuan's impersonation and used Xiao Xing, Zhu Xian, and the others to do that, she didn't seem to be that brainy. Could it be that a person's intelligence also had its highs and lows and sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't? Arbor only felt that the fog was thick and couldn't help but hesitate. Should I keep her for further investigation? However, Mr. Jojo was a man of his word. Since he had said that he would kill her, there was no way he could go back on his word. Otherwise, where would she put her little face? Jojo was in a dilemma when a warm hand patted the back of his hand. Jojo. The old madam finally spoke. Concubine sure is wrong, but Qingya is right about one thing. Your grandfather's birthday is just around the corner. It's not good for our Mu family to see blood. Just take it as giving face to your grandfather and let her off this time. The old madam said kindly. She turned around and glanced at Shi Huixin. Her eyes were slightly stern as she said, "Why aren't you thanking the crown princess for her grace?" A mere servant dared to shout in front of the crown princess. She simply didn't know what she was talking about. When you return, reflect on your mistakes. In the future, if there's nothing important, don't step out of the courtyard. Sir Jojo was originally considering whether he should keep this concubine Shi for a few more days to find out the whole story from her. In the end, was this concubine Shi the mastermind behind the order for Shantian Prefecture to chase after her? One had to know that in her previous life, she didn't even know until her death that her tragic fate was actually manipulated by someone. One could imagine how vicious and ruthless the person behind the scenes was and how deeply they had hidden. Was concubine Shi really the mastermind behind the assassination of Sir Jojo? Chapter 3269. Did she have such a meticulous brain? Judging from the slight reaction in her eyes when she heard the words Manor Head Gung, it was clear that she knew this person. Arbor was perplexed. Thank you, Crown Princess, for your grace. As soon as Caixio and Caichi let go, Shi Huixin hastily coughed several times before lying on the ground and shouting in a slightly hoarse voice. Arbor coldly swept a glance at her. Since the old madam had spoken, she would go along with it and let this woman off for now. She would find a day to have a deep chat with this woman. Mu Qingya sighed in relief and hurriedly said with a smile, "Look at us, we were so focused on talking with the crown princess that we're standing at the entrance of the garden. The food and wine are already prepared inside. Crown princess, please." The old madam also smiled and said, "Come, come, come. The sea of flowers in New South Garden is famous for being beautiful. You girls love it the most. Grandma will take you for a stroll." Sir Jojo wanted to laugh. He stole a glance at the old madam and saw that she was in high spirits. It was obvious that he was more interested. "You've just recovered from a serious illness and still need to rest. Although it's spring now, it's still quite cold today. It won't be good if you catch a cold." The old madam pursed her lips and muttered softly, "You're saying the same thing as your grandfather. I've been cooped up at home all year round. It's rare for me to come out to play. Jojo, accompany Grandma for a stroll." Arbor was a bit helpless, but seeing that the old madam was in high spirits, she nodded. The group of people clustered around the old madam. They appeared to be a harmonious and beautiful family, chatting and laughing along the way. However, who knew what the people in each branch were thinking at that moment? Jojo accompanied the old madam all the way. Blooming flowers filled their eyes. New South Garden was indeed a place to admire flowers. No wonder the old madam was in such high spirits. Today, the Mu family had booked the entire New South Garden, so the only people walking in the garden were the Mu family's members. There were no other people strolling around. The group walked around half of the garden. After all, the old lady was old and had just recovered from a long illness. Although he had some foundation in cultivation, he was still a little tired. Arbor then helped her to a nearby gazebo to sit down. Mu Qingya virtuously went out to make arrangements. She asked the servants to deliver tea and water, as well as a clean handkerchief for old madam to clean her hands. The old lady sipped her tea with a relaxed expression. Then, she held Arbor's hand and said, "Jojo, your grandfather's birthday is coming soon. Why don't you move back here tomorrow for a few days? Ever since you came back from the royal school, you haven't come back to stay. Your grandfather really misses you." Arbor tried his best to squeeze out a smile for the old lady, but his little face was still a little tense. The crown prince has been quite busy these days. He has to attend court every day. It's not very convenient for him to move back. The old madam looked disappointed, but she still held Arbor's hand and said, "Can't you just come back and stay for a few days? Yulon court is cleaned every day. You don't have to bring anything with you when you come back. Just bring yourself back." Arbor saw the sincerity in the old madam's eyes and his heart couldn't help but waver. He nodded and said, "Let's delay it for 2 days. I'll go back and tell the crown prince." The old madam's face instantly brimmed with a smile. She nodded repeatedly with joy in her eyes. Chapter 3270. Yes, I have to tell you. Grandma will wait for you at home 2 days later, old madam said happily. Arbor had been trying to shirk responsibility for 2 days, but she didn't expect old madam to take it so seriously. She couldn't help but sigh helplessly and nod hesitantly. Old madam was overjoyed. She reached out and pinched her little granddaughter's tender cheeks. "You can't lie to your grandma. I'm already a few decades old. I can't be fooled by a little girl like you." Arbor looked at her gloomily. "We said we'd come back, so we must." "Got it." Xiao Mu could only nod her small head again. Old madam laughed happily. Mu Qingya hurriedly comforted her with a smile. "Old madam, look at how happy you are. Old master has instructed us to keep an eye on your emotions. We can't let you be too happy or sad." Tisk old madam pouted angrily and snorted. "I'm not a puppet. How can I not laugh?" Madame Chiu hadn't been able to get a word in. Seeing this, she hurriedly said with a smile, "Isn't that so? Old madam is full of energy. It must be because she's happy to see the crown princess. That's why she's in such good spirits." After what happened just now, Mu Ro Yen had been biting her lip and lagging far behind the crowd with her auntie. When she heard Madame Chiu's shameless flattery, she couldn't help but spit. How shameless. Chiu Sure of the second branch usually looked like a shrewd person, but she didn't expect that she would speak without integrity. Seeing that the old Tai liked the crown prince consort so much, she rushed to flatter the crown prince consort. She was simply shameless. Sure Huaxin's face was dark, but her heart was still pounding. Just now, after she had come back from the gates of hell, she suddenly realized something. In the future, she couldn't face the crown princess directly. She could only beat around the bush. After all, their statuses were worlds apart. Even if the crown princess didn't use her full strength, she could still crush her like an ant just by using her status to suppress her. Thinking of this, Sure Huaxin couldn't help but shudder. She secretly scolded herself for acting rashly just now. But how could a normal person have such good self-control? How could they not fly into a rage when they suddenly saw their enemy right in front of them? A group of people sat in the pavilion and surrounded the old lady. They were enjoying tea and snacks happily. Suddenly, they saw a manservant rush over in a hurry. He quickly kowtowed and repeatedly shouted, "Old madam, madams, it's not good." Madam Chen brought a group of guards and broke in. We couldn't stop dozens of them. The old madam frowned. Which madam of the Chen family is so rude? Since the Mu family had reserved this garden for a day, it meant that during this day, as long as the Mu family did not leave, New South Garden could not be open to outsiders. This was an established rule. Everyone in Long Yen City knew about it. The old madam frowned and was about to stand up to ask when she saw the noisy group of people approaching. The woman in the lead with an ugly expression looked very familiar. The old madam narrowed her eyes and then put on a surprised expression. "Isn't this the wife of the Prime Minister? Why did you barge into New South Garden today?" Madam Chen immediately spotted Xiao Mu, who was sitting next to old madam, and suddenly dashed over. Chapter 3271. Ao Yi, Kai Xiu, and the others' expressions changed. They subconsciously reached out to stop the woman and scolded, "Stop! Get out of the way! I want to see the crown princess." Madam Chen barged her way to the front of everyone and gritted her teeth as she looked at Xiao Mu. Suddenly, she knelt before Xiao Mu with a plop and pleaded in a tearful voice, "Crown Prince Consort, please tell me my daughter's whereabouts on account of this subject's motherly love. I only have one daughter, Baojia. It is inevitable that I spoil her. If she has offended the Crown Prince Consort in any way, you can vent your anger on this subject wife. I hope that you can spare my daughter." Arbor looked at the woman in front of her with cold eyes. This person's words were really sophisticated. She insisted that she had something to do with Chen Baojia's disappearance. On the surface, she begged for mercy, but in fact, she was reprimanding her. She was clearly saying that she couldn't get along with Chen Baojia, the child who had been spoiled by her family. She, the crown princess, was not magnanimous enough. She was really a shrewd woman. If she followed her words, then it would be true that she had something to do with Chen Baojia. In fact, she had no interest in knowing whether Chen Baojia was dead or alive. She really didn't understand why these people liked to bite her and didn't want to let go. They only thought that she had done something to Chen Baojia. What a group of strange people. Was she, Arbor, such a boring person? If she wanted to make a move, she would directly kill her. Doing these sneaky things was not in line with her personality. Arbor sat quietly beside the old madam and stared coldly at Madam Chen. Madam Chen saw that she didn't speak for a long time and subconsciously looked up at her. However, when she met those dark and deep eyes, she couldn't help but shiver. This girl's awe-inspiring aura was really hard to resist. Not to mention her poor daughter Baojia, even she, as the left prime minister, has seen many families of officials in the officialdom. She has already practiced the style of officialdom. However, at this time, she can't help being awed by the momentum of the little girl in front of her. Chen Baojia's life or death has nothing to do with me. The young crown princess's cold words froze Madam Chen's heart. Her body inexplicably trembled, and her eyes narrowed as she looked at her. But Gu Yixuan and Long Min, who came with us, have witnessed the conflict between the crown princess and Baojia. Even Miss Zhongli died in. Does this crown prince consort still need to explain to you what she says or does? Xiao Mu interrupted her coldly, her eyes containing a frigid intent. Chen Baojia was missing and didn't return to Dragon Flame City. Perhaps she died on the mountain behind the Sun Moon Temple, or perhaps she had an accident and was still trapped there. These people didn't investigate anything and didn't care about anything. They only listened and believed that she dealt with Chen Baojia. If she really did it, did they think that Chen Baojia would still be alive? It was simply ridiculous. Arbor's cold gaze slid across Madam Chen's pale face. She said coldly, "Madam Chen, you mustered a lot of people today and brought dozens of people here. Do you want to fight with the crown princess or something? Does the crown princess dare to confront the boy from the Gu family and the girl from the Long family face to face? Ha, what right do those two unpresentable things have to confront the crown princess face to face? You really think they are important people? Chapter 3272. Madame Chen's expression changed slightly. She inwardly suppressed her anger and took a deep breath. Crown Prince Consort, you don't understand. When a mother goes crazy, who knows what kind of outrageous things she will do? Are you threatening me? Arbor narrows his eyes coldly. Bang! Madame Mu slams her hand on the stone table and glares at Madame Chen. Madame Chen, although the crown princess has lost her mother, she still has me as her grandmother. As long as I and the old man are here, no one can bully her. Madame Mu, I didn't mean that. Madame Chen softens her tone when she sees the atmosphere getting more and more stiff. Madame Mu stands up slowly. Arbor also stands up and reaches out to support her. Madame Chen, you think too highly of your daughter. What is the status of the crown princess? Does she need to feel sorry for your daughter? I believe in my granddaughter. Since she said it has nothing to do with her, then it has nothing to do with her. Today is the day of the Mu family to visit the garden and enjoy the flowers. I don't want outsiders to be present. Please go back. Madame Chen is so angry that her chest rises and falls slightly. She can't help but say, the crown princess said it has nothing to do with her. Then do you have any evidence? What evidence do you have? Madame Mu interrupts Madame Chen's words with dissatisfaction. Did you see the crown princess kidnap your daughter with your own eyes? Or did you see the crown princess kill your daughter with your own eyes? Where's your material evidence? Where's your witness? Just because Miss Long from the Long family and Gu family's brat made some baseless accusations, this basin of dirty water can be splashed onto the crown prince consort's head? Old Madame sneered. You are too naive. Madame Mu, she killed the girl of the Zhongli family in the secret land. Madame Chen can't help but interrupt Madame Mu's words with a sharp voice. She has been dissatisfied with our Baojia for a long time. At the beginning, Baojia and Jiwei were both assigned to His Highness the Crown Prince. Now one is dead and the other is missing. Are you happy, Crown Princess? Why don't you just admit that you're a jealous woman who wants them dead with all your heart? Shut up. A deep and cold voice came from outside the courtyard. Everyone was slightly startled and turned to look. He saw two figures standing on the cobblestone path leading to the pavilion. Mo Lien was dressed in an ink-colored court robe. He stood tall and straight not far away. His handsome face was covered with a layer of frost. His phoenix eyes were slightly raised, and the coldness was threatening. Left Prime Minister Chen Chaoji stood behind the Crown Prince. He felt waves of cold air coming from all over his body. He was so frightened that he didn't even dare to breathe loudly. In his heart, he was cursing his wife for being brainless. When he received the news that Madame had brought people to New South Garden to cause a ruckus, he had hurried over. Who knew that he would still run into His Highness the Crown Prince and let His Highness hear his wife's rude words? This matter could be big or small. If it was big, it would be disrespecting the Crown Princess. If it was small, it could be said that a mother spoke without thinking in a moment of desperation. It all depended on how the Crown Princess would deal with it. Why have you come? The young Crown Prince Consort blinked at Mo Lien, who was striding over with large strides. Prince Mo reached out and took the little fellow into his arms. He raised a hand and lightly patted her back. If I didn't come over, I would have been kept in the dark. So this is how these people treat you behind my back. Greetings to your Highness the Crown Prince. Chapter 3273. Every time Madame Chen and Madame Gao see you, do they yell at you without any manners? It's not as exaggerated as you say. Arbor was speechless. What does this have to do with the wife of the Prime Minister? This morning, she had seen Madame Gao at the entrance of Zhenhua workshop. Although Madame Gao was also quite impatient and wanted to buy the beautifying pill, she wasn't like Madame Luha, who stopped her and threw a tantrum and refused to let her go. Madame Gao did not take the blame. She was still very well-mannered. Mo Lien reached out to hold her little chin and carefully looked at her. Seeing that the little fellow's eyes were not red and teary, he sighed in relief. Arbor was baffled and raised her little paw to slap his hand away. "What are you doing?" The way the two of them interacted with each other naturally made the entire Mu family a little dumbfounded. The little crown princess actually slapped His Highness the Crown Prince's hand away without any trace of politeness. Matriarch Mu was the first to recover her wits and hurriedly led people forward to greet them. Mo Lien retracted his hand and reached out to support Matriarch Mu, who was bowing in greeting. He said softly, "Grandmother, no need to be so courteous. Grandson-in-law still wants to greet grandmother." You can't. Matriarch Mu hurriedly pulled him back and exchanged a few pleasantries with a smile. She secretly looked at the Crown Prince and secretly nodded in her heart. Unparalleled in character and appearance, outstanding in style. Her little granddaughter's taste was really superb. Arbor reached out her little hand and secretly tugged at his sleeve. "Have you finished inspecting the market?" Prince Mo turned back and nodded at her. He smiled and reached out to pull her to his side. "Jojo, I missed you." Everyone was stunned and felt a little uncomfortable being stuffed with a mouthful of dog food. What was going on? Did His Highness the Crown Prince usually get along with the little Crown Princess like this? Sir Jojo secretly glanced at grandmother and the others and somewhat embarrassedly reached out to push Prince Mo. "Don't push." Prince Mo glared at the little fellow. "You promised not to push me again. You promised me." Arbor didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He secretly pinched his waist and whispered, "Everyone's here." Mo Lien grunted, but he did not let go of her waist. He turned to look at Chen Chaoji and shouted angrily, "Chen Chaoji." Chen Chaoji was secretly wiping away the cold sweat on his forehead when he was suddenly called out by the Crown Prince. He felt a little uncomfortable. He stiffened for a moment, then hurriedly walked forward and bowed stiffly. Old subject is here. You heard what your wife said just now, right?" Mo Lien glanced at him coldly. "Do you have any thoughts?" What thoughts do you have?" Chen Chaoji only felt that the cold sweat on his head was becoming denser and denser. "Your wife spoke rudely and slandered the Crown Princess. This prince wants to submit a memorial to His Majesty and strip her of her second-rank title. Do you have any objections?" Although this was a question, Chen Chaoji was very clear that this was His Highness the Crown Prince's decision. "Do you have any objections?" Actually, what he meant was, "Do you have any objections?" This meant Chen Chaoji's face stiffened. He was the Prime Minister, but his wife was stripped of her second-rank title. In the future, when the official family gatherings were held, his wife would be many ranks lower than the right Prime Minister's wife. Madame Chen widened her eyes and couldn't help but ask, "Your Highness the Crown Prince, when did this subject slander the Crown Princess?" Chapter 3274. You just said that the Crown Princess is a jealous woman. Mo Lien coldly looked at Madame Chen in front of him. Originally, with his status, he didn't want to bicker with a shrew, but what kind of words did she say? Who gave her 100,000 iron guts, daring to point at his Jojo and scold him like this? Chen Chaoji hurriedly stepped forward and pinched his wife's lower back, stopping this stupid woman from spitting out the words that were about to come out of her mouth. He said with an embarrassed smile, "Your Highness, please calm down." It was this old official, this stupid woman, who spoke indiscreetly. "I ask your Highness to forgive her on account of her longing for her daughter and being a bit delirious. You also said that Chen Baojia and Zhongli Jiwei were the ones who were assigned to this prince." Mo Lien coldly looked at the stupid woman in front of him, his voice like it was fished out from an ice cellar. "Who gave you the courage to speak such nonsense? Who admitted it? Those two women have nothing to do with this prince. Does this prince's crown princess need to be jealous of these two ignorant women? Simply ridiculous. Prince Mo indifferently looked at her and said, from beginning to end, this prince only has the crown princess, who does the crown princess need to be jealous of? Chen Chaoji, your wife slandered this prince's crown princess like this, you must give this prince an explanation. The onlookers suddenly felt strangely stifled. They only felt that this dog food was so fucking full so uncomfortable, what to do? Can you stop showing off your dog food in front of this group of resentful women? In the Mu family, other than fourth uncle who was widowed and never married, which one of the masters of the first branch, second branch, and fifth branch didn't have a few beautiful concubines by their side? Like the crown prince who clearly stated that he only wanted the crown princess alone, there probably wasn't a second person in the divine continent, right? At this time, they collectively lost their memories, leaving aside the two brothers, the great emperor and Prince Khan, and intuitively felt that His Highness the Crown Prince's situation was very abnormal. On their continent, of course, the strong would become stronger. When one's cultivation rose, would they still have to worry about not having money and beauties throwing themselves at them? Who could point out that a strong person only accompanied by a beauty to pass his days? How was that possible? Was this little crown princess a reincarnated demon? How did she manage to bewitch the future crown prince? Chen Chaoji, what do you plan to do? Prince Mo continued to interrogate. He didn't intend to let Madame Chen off so easily. It was beneath him to deal with Madame Chen. Let Chen Chaoji personally deal with Madame Chen. Anyone who dared to bully his little emperor would definitely not have a good ending. Chen Chaoji smiled bitterly. He realized that he had no way of glossing over the matter today. According to the crown prince, if they didn't give him an explanation today, it was inevitable that the crown prince would hold a grudge against the Chen family because of this stupid woman. Being remembered by the future crown prince was not a good thing. Chen Chaoji hurriedly smiled apologetically and said, Your Highness, don't worry. When this official returns, I will definitely, are you trying to fool me? Prince Mo looked at him coldly, forget it, wait for this Highness to report to Imperial Father and let Imperial Father make a decision, don't, Chen Chaoji jumped in fright and hurriedly stopped him, this shrew spoke without reason, she deserves 20 lashes. He secretly glanced at the crown prince's expression and gritted his teeth, 30 lashes. This official will do it right away. I hope your Highness will not be angry. It's not me who will not be angry, it's my little crown princess who will not be angry, Prince Mo coldly corrected. Chen Chaoji nodded and hurriedly turned to the crown princess, I hope the crown princess will not be angry. Chapter 3275. The little crown princess only feels that this Chen Chaoji is a bit funny. With his character, he can actually sit in the position of the left prime minister. The great emperor's vision is really bad. The little guy curls his little mouth and looks on coldly as Chen Chaoji orders the servants to hold down Madame Chen and tie her to a tree. Then he personally lashes her 30 times while panting. Not one less, he doesn't dare to be lazy. While waving his arms, he hears Madame Chen's screams and curses. Mo Yen looks at Chen Chaoji and his wife with disdain. She reaches out and takes the little guy's little hand, Jojo, don't be angry anymore. What can she be angry about? Arbor shakes her head, but she can't help but ask in a low voice, where do you think Chen Baojia went? It had been so long, and those who should have returned had already returned, but Chen Baojia still hadn't returned. Could it be that her crow's mouth was right, and she was still sealed in some corner of the back mountain of the Sun Moon Divine Hall, unable to respond to her cries, unable to do anything? Prince Mo snorts, what does it have to do with us? Let's not talk about her. He looks like he doesn't want to talk about it. Jojo secretly finds it funny, but her face is calm. She naturally won't drag him to talk about another woman. Did you find anything in the city square today? Arbor asks in a low voice. She raises her hand and pinches the back of his hand. Are you tired? Very tired. Mo Yen squeezed to her side aggrievedly and muttered quietly, we searched every nook and cranny of the market, wishing nothing more than to dig up every single floor tile. We didn't find anything. Arbor is a little surprised. She originally thought that if they searched the city square again today, they might find some small things. She didn't expect Tianyin's movements to be so fast. In a flash, they've cleaned up and disappeared without a trace. Jojo, your husband has been busy all morning, but I didn't get anything. My heart hurts. Prince Mo held her little hand and said softly, you have to comfort me. Arbor suppressed the smile in his heart and turned to look at him seriously. He nodded his little head vigorously. Yes. Mo Lien's gloomy expression was swept away. She immediately beamed and said, we have nothing to do in the afternoon. Let's go to Dragon Flame City for a walk. Ahem. Matriarch Mu coughed lightly at the right time. She could tell that this crown prince only had eyes for her little granddaughter. He had been staring at her for so long, and he didn't even look away. Mo Lien hurriedly turned her head and smiled at the old madam. Grandma, do you have any instructions for me? Matriarch Mu was overjoyed to hear her calling her grandma. She inexplicably switched sides and sided with her. Your Highness, this old one has discussed with Jojo just now. Matriarch Mu quickly recounted the matter of asking Arbor to come home. Then, she looked at Prince Mo and said, since both of you have nothing to do in the afternoon, pack up a little and move back here for a few days. Mo Lien looked at Arbor inquiringly. Arbor looked at him helplessly. Mo Lien instantly understood his little wife's meaning. He thought for a moment and said, Grandma, it's just that we didn't have a good time staying here last time. He blinked and acted cute. Jojo and I are both kind people. We always get bullied when we go back to the Mu family. It's not impossible for us to go back, but we have to set some rules. Both of you are kind people. Everyone looked at Prince Mo and the Crown Princess as if they had seen a ghost. Chapter 3276. You two black-hearted people are already famous throughout Dragon Flame City. Speaking of the two of you, the number of things you've done to others is simply too many to count. You still call yourself a kind person. I really don't know where you get the face to actually say such things. Everyone secretly peeked at the Crown Prince and his wife. Matriarch Mu nodded with a smile. Okay. Grandma promises you. You can make your own decisions in Jade Orchid Court. You can do whatever you want. The more Matriarch looked at these two children, the more she liked them. They were such good children, good-looking and reasonable. She really didn't know how she could have angered them last time. It was most likely because Qingya didn't make proper arrangements. Qingya, now that the two children are back, don't interfere in their court matters anymore, Matriarch instructed with a smile. Mu Qingya's face immediately flushed red. How could she interfere in the Crown Prince's court matters? How could she have the ability and courage to intervene in the Crown Prince's and Crown Princess's affairs? When the Crown Prince and Crown Princess returned last time, she had kindly arranged for some people to be at their disposal. Who would have thought that such a thing would happen, and she had been criticized to this day? Mu Qingya took a deep breath and didn't refute Matriarch. Instead, she nodded with a smile. Yes, old madam. Qingya won't let anything like Shaoxing and Zhu Xian happen in Jade Orchid Court again. Matriarch nodded happily and patted the back of Mu Qingya's hand. I'm also very assured when Qingya does things. Mu Qingya pursed her lips and smiled gently, looking like it was Qingya's honor to be able to reassure Matriarch. She looked gentle and docile. The young Crown Prince Consort took a careful look at this person before turning her face away with a slight frown. At this time, Chen Chaoji had finished whipping Madame Chen. He hurriedly threw away the bloody whip in his hand and ran to Prince Mo, trembling. He bowed and said, Your Highness, this humble subject has has finished his punishment. Mo Lien swept him a glance before nodding coldly. Bring him back and discipline him strictly. If he dares to disrespect the Crown Prince Consort again in the future, a mere 30 lashes won't be enough to save him. Yes, yes, yes. Chen Chaoji let out a slight breath and ordered people to carry the whimpering Madame Chen out of New South Garden in a hurry. He didn't dare to stay here for a second longer, afraid that the Crown Prince would suddenly change his mind. Prince Mo looked coldly at Chen Chaoji's back. His eyes flickered, and stay up late understood and prepared to leave. Jojo suddenly said, come back. Stay up late blinked and turned to look at Prince Mo. Seeing him nod with a slight frown, Stay up late hurriedly retreated. That's enough. Xiao Mu cast a sidelong glance at him, and her soft, small claws pinched his large hand with distinct joints. Chen Chaoji has been an official for 30 years, so he's a shrewd person to begin with. How could he not be on guard? Prince Mo pursed his lips. Holding his wife's hand, he turned to Matriarch Mu and said, Grandma, we'll go back first. Okay. Grandma will wait for you at home. Matriarch Mu nodded with a smile. On the other hand, after Chen Chaoji ordered people to carry Madame Chen out of the garden, he hurriedly ordered people to be on guard and pay attention to their surroundings. It wasn't until he ordered people to quickly drive back to the Chen estate that he breathed a sigh of relief. When he alighted from the carriage, Chen Chaoji's back was drenched in sweat. He subconsciously raised his sleeve to wipe the sweat off his forehead. Chapter 3277. Master, what's wrong? The coachman looked at his master with some confusion. Chen Chaoji said with a sullen expression, close the gate and carry Madam to the guest court, quick. Prepare a visiting card. This official will personally visit Prince Kang's estate in the afternoon. After saying this, Chen Chaoji ordered people to carry Madam to the guest court. As soon as the gate to the guest court was closed, Chen Chaoji slapped Madame Chen's face, unable to bear it anymore. Madame Chen had been whipped 30 times and was covered in blood without any strength. How could she withstand Chen Chaoji's hard slap? She immediately rolled down from the stretcher carried by the servants and called out, Master, with tears and snot running down her face. Stupid woman! Chen Chaoji shouted angrily, impossibly stupid. After the Crown Prince and Crown Prince Consort returned from the mystic realm, did anyone go up against them? Only an idiot like you would foolishly run to New South Garden to seek death after being instigated by a few words. If this official hadn't arrived in time, do you think you would have been able to keep your life? Although he didn't have much contact with His Highness the Crown Prince, he had received information from various sources that he was a vicious and merciless person. When he left New South Garden and returned to the Chen estate, he thought he would be attacked by the Crown Prince's men. In the end, the journey that left him on edge was peaceful and uneventful. Although he didn't know what was going on, Chen Chaoji had a premonition that His Highness the Crown Prince's actions were definitely not limited to these 30 lashes. Madame Chen's behavior of berating the Crown Princess and slandering the Crown Princess had clearly crossed His Highness the Crown Prince's bottom line. He definitely wasn't joking when he said he was going to submit a memorial to His Majesty to strip Madame of her title. Chen Chaoji took a deep breath and turned to say to his attendant, immediately prepare a sedan. We're going to Prince Kang's estate now. If His Highness the Crown Prince really submitted a memorial to His Majesty to strip Madame of her title, then his Chen family would definitely become the biggest joke of the spring. Master. Madame Chen's face was covered in blood as she cried out pitifully, Master, I couldn't bear it any longer and committed such an impulsive act. Chen Chaoji flicked his sleeves and strode out. He had just arrived at the gate of Prince Kang's mansion when he found that the gate of Prince Kang's mansion was tightly shut. His heart thumped. On the other side, the Crown Prince's letter of impeachment, as well as the letters of admonition from the imperial censors, entered the imperial study like snowflakes. Chen Chaoji was given the cold shoulder at Prince Kang's mansion, so he hastily went to Prince Jianpei's mansion, asking Prince Jianpei to come forward and mediate. After receiving Lord Chen's generous gift, the old king of Jianping patted his chest and promised that he would definitely help. Without even eating, he rushed into the palace to seek an audience with the great emperor. The courtiers who had received the news could not help but secretly watch a good show. The king of Jianping seemed to have forgotten how he had suffered at the hands of the young couple. No one knew what the king of Jianping and the great emperor were talking about in the study after they closed the door. However, when it was close to evening, the decree of the imperial noble title had arrived at the Qin residence. Not only that, His Highness the Crown Prince also bestowed 2 beauties to Lord Chen. The imperial eunuch's words infuriated Chen Chaoji so much that he wanted to bang his head against the wall. His Highness said that Madame Chen is the paragon of virtue and virtue in the imperial capital. You definitely won't be jealous of these 2 beauties, nor will you become a jealous woman. Lord Chen, please accept these 2 beauties first. His Highness said that there will be more in the future if it isn't enough. It was normally 6:00 at night. Chapter 3278. If that's not enough, there will be more in the future. Lord Chen's eyebrows twitched. His Highness the Crown Prince spoke as if the 2 beauties in front of him were oranges and pears in the market that night. The old king of Jianping angrily sent a letter to the Eastern Palace, wanting to argue with the 2. The result was, sorry, His Highness the Crown Prince followed the Crown Princess back to her parents' home. The old king of Jianping smashed the orange tree in front of the door with a slap. How could that couple be so infuriating? And this Crown Prince, wasn't he too lacking in moral integrity? The Crown Princess went back to her parents' home, and you followed her. Kai Xiu and Kai Chi led a group of palace maids and eunuchs of the Eastern Palace to tidy up the Jade Orchid Garden inside and outside, then led everyone away. Arbor had someone bring Chen Kuei over. The current Chen Kuei had washed away the gloomy smell on her body, and had a bit more sunshine. Half of her face was black, and it didn't look as dark as before. Sit. Arbor pointed to the seat beside her, letting Chen Kuei sit down. Chen Kuei bowed and cupped her hands, then said, "Thank you, little Mississippi." Arbor looked at her and asked, "Have you gotten used to it?" Chen Kuei smiled and said, "Little miss, don't worry, Chen Kuei is doing very well. Every day, when I have free time, I plant flowers and drink tea. When I have an epiphany, I go into seclusion to cultivate. It's much better than living alone in the past." The little Crown Princess nodded, "That's good. Chen Kuei, I want to ask you something." "Little miss, please speak. Are you familiar with Wuxia?" Chen Kuei was slightly surprised, then smiled and said, "We usually don't communicate much, but occasionally we will contact each other. But since your mother left the Mu family and I went to Chasing Wind Garden, we haven't contacted each other." Arbor nodded, "I remember Mama mentioned it to me before. She said that mother's relationship with Wuxia is not bad." "Yes." Chen Yi nodded. "Your mother once praised Wuxia, saying that although she didn't have any cultivation and looked weak, she was actually a very strong woman. It's indeed not easy for Qinya to manage such a big Mu family all these years." Arbor nodded. "Can you tell me more about her?" Hearing that, Chen Kuei laughed. "What does little miss want to know?" Chen Kuei will definitely tell you everything he knows. Logically speaking, she should hate my mother. After all, according to normal people's thinking, it should be my mother's arrival that broke her and Mu Jingfeng apart, right? But she can actually befriend my mother as if nothing has happened. Chen Kuei hurriedly advised, "Mu Qingya, this woman, is somewhat different from other women. Look, even your mother praised her for her strong personality. Ever since your mother married into the Mu family, Mu Qingya has completely cut ties with your father. Everyone in the Mu family knows this. But your father isn't a good thing. He wants to have a wife on both sides and hug on both sides." Chen Kuei snorted disdainfully and sighed, "If it weren't for the Mu family and the Long family having a marriage agreement of 300 years, how would your mother have married into the Mu family?" "What do you mean?" Arbor blinked. The Mu family's ancestor, Chao Yang, once saved the life of the Long family's ancestor. At that time, the two families had a marriage agreement of 300 years. Chen Kuei smiled bitterly. Chapter 3279. It's agreed that within 300 years, there will be a pair of juniors in each generation who will marry. Regardless of whether it's a Long family girl marrying into the Mu family or a Mu family girl marrying into the Long family, there will always be a pair that needs to be married. So my mother is merely a sacrifice for the marriage alliance? Arbor frowned slightly, a bit of displeasure in his heart. This kind of marriage alliance was too undesirable. If it was done carelessly, wouldn't it ruin his mother's lifelong happiness? Chen Yi sighed deeply. This is something that can't be helped. The ancestors' agreement cannot be violated. Due to the Long family's bloodline, the number of direct descendants is decreasing with each generation. In your mother's generation, there are only two siblings, your uncle Long Chuyu and your mother. For the sake of this marriage alliance, Miss married over, but the ending is heartbreaking. Chen Yi sighed. She then looked at Arbor and said, fortunately, Miss married well. If your mother's spirit is in heaven, she will definitely be very gratified. His Highness the Crown Prince was really too good to their family's Mississippi. A man like the Crown Prince was hard to find in this world. Sir Jojo wrinkled his little nose. Since Mu Qingya's personality is as strong and tenacious as Senior Nurse said, why did she still get involved with Mu Jingfeng even though she clearly knew that the marriage alliance between the Mu family and the Long family was inevitable? This? Chen Yi couldn't help but laugh bitterly, glancing at the stoic-faced young lady in front of her. This old one has never experienced love in her life. Mrs. words really stumped me. Arbor's lips curled. Perhaps, it's just that she hid it too well, and Senior Nurse and Mother were kept in the dark by her. That won't happen. Chen Yi shook her head, subconsciously wanting to defend Mu Qingya. Ever since Qingya became pregnant, she repeatedly tried to get rid of the child. I remember the most ruthless time was when she took abortion medicine. However, it was strange that Mu Rochuan had managed to survive despite being surrounded by danger several times. Later, it was old Madam who came forward to keep the child. Speaking of which, Mu Rochuan is quite lucky. Speaking of the past, Chen Yi couldn't help but sigh slightly. She looked out the window in the distance and said softly, not long after that, because of the Long family's matter, Miss didn't have time to care about anything else. Miss, you don't have to be suspicious. At that time, I checked the abortion medicine, and old Madam also sent people to check it. She wasn't acting, it was real. The young Crown Prince Consort pursed her lips and absent-mindedly nodded. How can there be such a good person in this world? Chen Yi didn't try to persuade him any further. He knew that this child was extremely cautious and wouldn't have a good impression of Mu Qingya for no reason. Arbor Mu's is Miss of the Mu. Arbor's. Why? Why don't you miss? Mrs. Miss. Miss, why are you always in our way? An ear-piercing scream came from outside the door, mixed with the cries of a few infants. Impudent. Auntie Jing's voice abruptly rang out. How dare you barge in without being summoned by the Crown Prince Consort? You're really too bold for a mere concubine. Who gave you the guts to do this without any rules and regulations? Yuan Qiong's face paled, and she tightly hugged her daughter in her arms. She was like a little white flower, teetering in the wind and frost, on the verge of tears. Miss 8 is seriously ill, please treat her, Crown Princess. Chapter 3280. Scoundrel. Aunt Jing had been in the imperial palace for a long time. When had she ever seen such an impudent and rude woman? She was truly angered to the point that her heart ached. What is it? The young Crown Princess walked out of the door and saw Yuan Qiong's disheveled and tearful appearance. It was as if someone here had bullied the mother and daughter. She frowned and looked coldly at Yuan Xiong-er. What are you doing? When Yuan Xiong-er saw the young crown princess walk out of the room, she hurriedly hugged the child and struggled with all her might. She repeatedly cried out, Crown Princess, please save 8th young Miss's life, Crown Princess. The 2 little palace maids who were holding her didn't dare to kill her because they were obstructing her from carrying the child. In the end, Yuan Xiong-er broke free from them. Yuan Xiong-er stumbled and fell at the young crown princess's feet with the child in her arms. She wailed loudly and shouted, Crown Princess, please be merciful and save 8th young Miss's life. Arbor coldly glanced at her. The bone-chilling coldness in her eyes made Yuan Xiong-er shiver all over for no reason. The young crown princess's eyes were too cold, as if she was looking at a corpse. Yuan Xiong-er subconsciously hugged the baby in her arms tightly. 8th young Miss Mu Roshue was only 20 months old from birth. Being tightly held by Yuan Xiong-er, she burst into tears. Pull her away. The young crown princess coldly shouted. A few low-level servant women pounced over. One of them grabbed Yuan Xiong-er's collar and pulled her away from the young crown prince consort. Yuan Xiong-er cried out in alarm and the child in her hands was snatched away. Her eyes instantly reddened and she screamed crazily, What are you doing? Are you trying to snatch someone's child in broad daylight? She didn't expect that the young crown princess would order people to attack her the moment she saw her. Not only that, she even directly snatched the child in her arms. What was she trying to do? Was she trying to kill her 8th young mistress by throwing her to her death? At this thought, Yuan Xiong-er couldn't help but tremble all over. She stared at Arbor in horror, as if she was a poisonous snake or a fierce beast. Crown Princess. An old nanny gently handed the child to Arbor. Arbor looked down and saw that the little person's face was already red from being strangled. Coupled with the fact that he was crying non-stop, his mouth had sucked in a lot of air. At this moment, he was panting and gasping for air with his little mouth open. She reached out and gently rubbed the baby's swaddling clothes. Then, she untied the apron around the baby's neck and gently pressed it twice. Finally, the baby's crying gradually stopped. Yuan Xiong-er widened her eyes in anger and screamed with a pale face, Crown Princess, what are you doing? Slap him. The old nanny at the side immediately rolled up her sleeves, took 2 steps forward, and slapped Yuan Xiong-er's white and tender little face. Ah! Yuan Xiong-er's body tilted and she fell to the ground. She felt a burning pain on her cheek and felt that the left side of her face was swollen. Her eyes narrowed slightly, and she angrily looked up in the direction of Arbor. She seemed to be very confused as to why she was suddenly slapped. Saishio, tell her the reason, Arbor said coldly. Saishio took a step forward and said sternly, You don't know the rules. You barged in without being summoned by the crown princess. This is the first crime. You were possessed by a drama queen and showed off in front of the crown princess. This is the second crime. Chapter 3281. You're just a mistress of the Mu family. Isn't it good for you to live a simple life? Why do you have to make trouble in front of the crown princess? You even dragged your own child into this mess. The child is still so young. Do you want her to learn your cheap ways from now on and become a despicable person like you when she grows up? Yuan Xiong-er widened her eyes in shock. She didn't expect that the little palace maid beside the crown princess would dare to reprimand her like this. You. She was so angry that her whole body trembled. Arbor didn't bother to look at her and directly carried the child into the room. After checking the child's body, he took out a mild antipyretic medicine and carefully poured it into the child's mouth. When Mo Lien stepped into the courtyard, he saw a woman with a head full of pearls and jade ornaments. Her hair was disheveled and she was forced to kneel in the courtyard. He frowned and walked over as if he didn't see anything. As soon as he pushed open the door, He saw his little fellow bending over with her back to him and pouring medicine into the mouth of a baby. Mo Lien slipped to his wife's side like a gust of wind and glanced at the baby who was placed on the fluffy blanket. Is the fever gone? Yes. Arbor had already finished feeding the baby. He put down the medicine bottle and turned to look at him. You sent the state preceptor away? Mo Lien pursed his lips and nodded. The state preceptor suddenly came to visit the Mu family, so the old master called him over. He didn't know why that old evildoer came to the Mu family. He said a lot and in the end, he even took the old master's birthday banquet invitation card. This made the crown prince very suspicious. Did the state preceptor come here today for no reason to personally ask the old master for an invitation card? Arbor tidied up the baby's swaddling clothes and picked her up. At this time, the child was already asleep. The abnormal blush on her small face gradually faded. At this time, there was a little pink and tender color on her porcelain white face. Her breathing was also much more normal than before. The young crown prince consort's gaze inexplicably softened a little. Prince Mo's eyes lit up as he watched from the side. His wife liked children. This was a good sign. In the future, perhaps they could cough, have a few more babies to make their wives happy. Your Highness, Your Highness. When Yuan Xiong saw Prince Mo walking out of the room with the little crown princess, she couldn't help but struggle for a moment, desperately trying to move forward on her knees. The old woman who was pressing down on Yuan Xiong's shoulder had an angry look in her eyes. She exerted some strength in her hand, causing Yuan Xiong to cry out in pain. Your Highness, please uphold justice. The crown princess suddenly beat me up without saying anything and stole my child. The old woman who was pressing her down was even more ruthless. Yuan Xiong cried out in pain. Teach her the rules, Mo Lien coldly said, then walked out of the door with the little crown princess. They hadn't walked far when they heard the sound of slapping in the face, accompanied by the old woman's angry rebuke. You're just a lowly servant outside. How dare you call yourself me in front of the crown princess? This Mu family is indeed uneducated. It seemed that Yuan Xiong had received the education she deserved. Where are we going, Jojo? Prince Mo asked. To the old master's north courtyard. Arbor looked down at Mu Roshue, who was sleeping soundly in his arms. It's better to leave this child with the old madam. Chapter 3282. When Arbor arrived, Matriarch Mu was just about to have dinner. Hearing that her granddaughter and her husband had arrived, she was overjoyed and hurriedly ordered the servants to bring more chopsticks, pulling them to eat together. Who is this child? Arbor glanced at Kai Xiu, who was behind him. Prince Mo was secretly amused, knowing that this little fellow was too lazy to explain. Kai Xiu hurriedly stepped forward and recounted what happened in Yulan court. Matriarch Mu's face darkened, and she felt a little depressed. She had just invited this little ancestor back home to stay for a while. How did that ignorant mistress come to her courtyard to cause a ruckus? She suddenly had some doubts about Mu Qingya's housekeeping skills. Previously, when she saw Mu Qingya managing the entire Mu family, she was quite organized and didn't have so many messy matters. Why did it feel like her abilities had declined a lot recently? Or was it that the mistress, Yuan Xiong, was too good at causing trouble by jumping up and down in the eldest branch? Grandmother, you've just recovered from a serious illness, so you still need to recuperate. But that Yuan Xiong, you've seen her character. Arbor couldn't help but explain, her brain isn't good, and her methods are even more vulgar. With her current momentum of being favored by Mu Jingfeng, her child's fever is so high. How could there be no doctor to treat her child? She just has to pretend in front of me. Does she think everyone is a fool like her? Matriarch Mu sighed. Naturally, she was cursing Yuan Xiong in her heart. Everyone thought that the little crown princess was young and inexperienced, but she was smart and didn't know anything. Her eyes were as clear as fire. I don't care about the grudges between her and the eldest branch's wife. Today, she came to my court with her child, which means she doesn't know proper etiquette. This crown princess taught her a fierce lesson. It's also good for her to remember in the future that she shouldn't cause trouble for me and Qian, when she has nothing better to do. Since she pretended in front of me, I'll give her an unforgettable lesson. Matriarch Mu nodded, but she didn't know whether to laugh or cry in her heart. The young crown prince consort's stoic face was taut, but she was truly swift and decisive when it came to doing and speaking, not giving the slightest bit of face to others. I understand. Matriarch Mu patted the back of Qiao Mu's hand with a smile. She then turned to the nanny beside her, who had her head bowed, and said, "Bring the child to my room. I'll raise her here for a period of time." "Sorry to trouble you, grandmother." "How is it troublesome?" The old madam smiled and said, "Little 8 is also my granddaughter. Letting her stay by Yuan Xiong's side is harming her." Speaking of this, old Madame Fu felt a little angry in her heart. The reason why Yuan Xiong dared to do this was definitely because of Mu Jingfeng's protection. It was really enough. Jingfeng, this child, looked good in the past, but in recent years, he had become worse and worse. Since he had found Qinya to be his second wife, he had also created a mistress to humiliate her. If it was any other madam, they would not be happy. Moreover, this child was actually raised by an outsider. It was truly unruly to the extreme. Arbor said, "Grandmother, when you were cultivating, you were too eager to advance, which led to a bit of qi deviation. If grandmother trusts me, take the medicinal cuisine I prescribed for her for half a year. She should be almost fully recovered." Matriarch Mu's eyes suddenly lit up when she heard this. There were some problems with her meridians that even an old physician might not be able to see, but her granddaughter was able to point it out. Chapter 3283. Jojo, do you really have a way to cure grandmother's chronic illness? Old Madame Mu hurriedly asked, "Will eating medicinal cuisine work?" Arbor nodded. "Grandmother, do you want to try?" Yes, of course. Eating medicinal cuisine is such a simple thing, so why not try it? Old Madame Mu nodded with a grin. Besides, if my granddaughter says there's a way, then there's definitely a way. Arbor nodded. The young couple accompanied Old Madame Mu for dinner. Today, Old Madame Mu had a great appetite and ate a lot. The dinner table was also filled with laughter and laughter. Although Sir Jojo was expressionless the entire time, for some reason, Old Madame Mu felt that the little fellow's cold face was inexplicably cute. Old master, what's wrong?" The voice of a nanny who was guarding the door suddenly sounded. Then, the nanny seemed to have been pushed to the side and bumped into something, causing her to cry out in pain. The door to the room was forcefully pushed open. Mu Jingfeng stood at the door, fuming. He strode in and bowed to Old Madame Mu. "Mother." He then turned to glare at Arbor. "Where's the child? You evil creature, you've only been back for less than half a day, yet you're already running amok." Old Madame Mu slammed the table in anger. "What are you doing? Barging in and shouting. Do you still have His Highness the Crown Prince in your eyes?" When Mu Jingfeng found his beloved concubine in Yulan court and saw that her cheeks were red and swollen from being slapped, his mind went blank. Then, he heard Yuan Xiong complain tearfully that the crown princess had snatched her child and indiscriminately hit her. Mu Jingfeng was even angrier when he heard this. This evil creature, did she want to anger her father to death the moment she returned? Now that he heard Old Madame Mu's reprimand, he could not help but inwardly quiver. He quickly turned to look at Mo Yen, who was sitting at the table with an unusually cold and furious expression. Seeing Prince Mo's expression that was about to explode, Mu Jingfeng's heart thumped. However, he couldn't help but clench his fists and say, "Mother, I'm here to pick up little 8. Xiong is very worried about her daughter. The crown princess fooled around and brought little eighth to you. Xiao Ba will stay here with me for a period of time. Matriarch Mu calmly interrupted Mu Jingfeng. The moment he said this, not only did Yuan Xiong's expression change, even Mu Jingfeng could not help but reveal a look of surprise. Old madam! Yuan Xiong cried out. The old madam shot her a cold glance. I've already made up my mind. Don't say anything else. How is little eight going to live her life in the future if she follows such an unpresentable person like you? Yuan Xiong's eyes widened in surprise. Mu Jingfeng suppressed the anger in his heart and shouted at Arbor, "Are you happy now? You're causing trouble the moment you come back. Shut up." Mo Lien slammed the table and stood up. Her cold eyes turned to Mu Jingfeng. Mu Jingfeng, try scolding my wife again. It was my idea to raise little eight by my side, Matriarch Mu coldly said. Matriarch Mu said coldly and glanced at Mu Jingfeng. If you have an opinion, tell it to your father. Arbor curtsied. Grandmother, I'll take my leave first. She felt like her breathing was about to stop if she stayed with that scum for a second longer. Arbor pulled Mo Lien out of the door and came face to face with Mu Qinya, who had hurried over. Arbor looked meaningfully at Mu Qinya. Great Madam Mu, you've got some tricks. Chapter 3284. Mu Qinya was startled. Then, she calmly took half a step back and bowed to Prince Mo and Arbor. Greetings, Crown Prince and Crown Princess. Xiao Mu's gaze swept over her coldly before she nodded and said, This Crown Prince Consort knows that you have the intention to scheme against that outside. Do you know why I'm so considerately cooperating with you? Arbor slowly walked up to Mu Qinya, whose head was slightly lowered. Because in my opinion, these tricks of yours, both inside and outside the house, are very stupid. I can cooperate with you this time to suppress that mistress. Next time, it can also be your turn. Arbor stretched out his hand. Mu Qinya subconsciously took a step back and shrunk her shoulders. Arbor's small hand paused in midair for a while before gently falling down and helping Mu Qinya smooth the hair that was floating in front of her eyes to the back of her head. There's no trick that can escape my eyes. Arbor stretched out 2 fingers and gestured with his eyes. He said coldly, Be a good first madam and don't provoke me. Okay. I know you're a smart person. She gently stroked Mu Qinya's shoulder twice and suddenly smiled. The smile in her eyes was deep and cold, as if a cold light had passed through the cold moon. If you want to hide it, then hide it deeper. Don't let me find out anything. She took a deep look at Mu Qinya, then turned around and walked slowly to Mo Lien, who was smiling faintly, and took his hand. It wasn't until the 2 figures disappeared from the end of the corridor that Song Lu, who had been standing stiffly with her head lowered, couldn't help but fall to the ground. Wet with cold sweat, Nanny Chiu couldn't help scolding in a low voice, Hurry up and get up. What are you doing? Mu Qinya took a deep breath. Her straightened back was already drenched in cold sweat at some point. The little girl's eyes were like a venomous snake from hell. When she stared at him, it made his heart darken. He couldn't see the slightest bit of light. It was a little scary. Inside Yulon Court, Arbor sat on the brocade couch. With a wave of his small hand, a circle of spiritual energy appeared in front of him. The demonic eye that was attached to Mu Qinya's shoulder came into play and clearly reflected their current situation. After Mu Qinya paid her respects to the old madam, she pacified the irritable Mu Jingfeng before returning to her own gilded garden. Along the way, Song Lu naturally talked about the little crown princess's vile behavior. Mu Qinya couldn't help but scold her when she saw that her words were getting out of hand. Nanny Chiu hurriedly asked her to calm down. After the master and servants returned to the courtyard, Mu Qinya sat down by the window, looking exhausted. She supported her chin with one hand and stared blankly outside the window for a long time. Xiao Mu creased her brows and abruptly cast a sidelong glance, her vigilant gaze sweeping over her surroundings. Mo Lien just happened to step through the door. Seeing her wide-open eyes and her head turning back and forth as if she was looking at something, she couldn't help but smile and step forward to hug her. "Looking at your husband?" "No, Sir Jojo," said expressionlessly. "Chirp." Mo Lien lowered his head and pecked her on the lips. "Punishment for lying." Lord Jojo absent-mindedly looked around and subconsciously reached out to cover his thin lips that were close to hers. Chapter 3285. "I feel like someone's watching us," Arbor said with a puzzled expression, her little hand falling loosely on his lips. "Little hoodwinker." Prince Mo lowered his head and continued to kiss her. "Really?" Sir Jojo looked into his eyes with a serious expression. Mo Lien was slightly taken aback. Only then did he realize that this little guy wasn't joking with him, so he collected his thoughts and looked around. "There's no divine perception fluctuation." Mo Lien blinked. Sir Jojo jumped off the couch and walked barefoot to the window. He stuck his head out to take a look, then retracted his gaze in puzzlement. There was a prickly feeling in his back, and he didn't know what was going on. Mo Lien held his wifey's hand and returned to the brocade divan to sit down. He carried her onto his lap and wrapped his arms around her small waist. "Qiao Qiao, is it because you feel uncomfortable all over in the Mu family?" "It's fine. If you don't like it, we can leave tomorrow." Sir Jojo also felt that he might be a little too sensitive. He turned his head to glance at him and said, "Humph. If I leave right after coming, wouldn't I be telling everyone that I'm afraid of Mu Jingfeng?" She drew the light and shadow circled by the demonic eye closer to her eyes and frowned at Mu Qingya and the others. No matter how she looked at it, Mu Qingya looked like a docile and amiable woman. She really couldn't find any flaws in her. Could it be that she was really overthinking it? "Go and close the doors and windows." Mu Qingya gave Nanny Chio a look. The latter immediately understood and hurriedly closed all the doors and windows before returning to Mu Qingya's side. Mu Qingya stood up. Seeing that Song Lu wanted to follow her, she impatiently brushed her sleeve and pushed her away. "Song Lu, if you criticize Second Miss in front of me again in the future, you can leave on your own. I can't control you anymore. In the future, I'll have your new master take care of you." The servant turned pale with fright. She hurriedly knelt down and said with tears streaming down her face, "First madam, I won't dare not casually criticize the crown princess again." "Remember what you said today," Mu Qingya said coldly. "Wait outside." "Yes." Song Lu wiped her tears and pitifully climbed up from the ground. She then retreated to the door and closed it again. "This girl is too unruly." Mu Qingya sighed. With First Madam taking care of her, she can always become more mature. Nanny Chio smiled and held Mu Qingya's arm. Mu Qingya smiled faintly and patted Nanny Chio's hand before leading her behind the screen. The two of them walked to a row of wooden cabinets at the back and looked at each other. Mu Qingya stretched out her hand and twisted open a jade wall beside her. The wooden cabinet on the left moved backward, making a small path that only allowed one person to pass through. Mu Qingya and Nanny Chio walked in one after another. Unexpectedly, there was a small room behind the wooden cabinet. There was only a small birch table in the small room. It was more than a meter long and had two curved corners. In the middle of the table was something covered with a piece of black cloth. Mu Qingya stared blankly at the thing on the table. When she turned her head to the side, a ruthless glint flashed across her eyes. At that moment, Nanny Chio had already quietly walked behind her. She was holding a large black lacquered wooden box in her arms, a cold glint flashing in her eyes. She put the box on the ground and opened the lid. Arbor's pupils contracted. Chapter 3286. Inside the lacquered wooden box was a naked wooden figurine. It had a golden ring on its head and silver needles pierced into all the major acupuncture points on its body. It was so bright that it made people dizzy. Mo Yen curled her lips. I didn't expect Madame Mu to play this trick. The two took a closer look and saw a string of birth characters engraved on the figurine's chest. Arbor thought for a moment and saw that it wasn't her mother's birth characters, nor was it her own. A trace of doubt appeared in her eyes. Nanny Chio handed a small hammer to Mu Qingya with a murderous look on her face. Mu Qingya punched the wooden figurine and muttered something under her breath. What is she saying? Arbor narrowed her eyes. Mu Qingya was muttering in the image. Her voice was so soft that she couldn't hear it clearly. However, looking at her ferocious face, it seemed that the little person under her was her mortal enemy. Mu Qingya kept hitting the figurine with the hammer in her hand. Every time she hit it, fine beads of sweat appeared on her forehead. When she hit it for the 9th time, she seemed to be suffering from the backlash of the Yen Xing technique. A trace of blood seeped out of the corner of her lips. Madam. Nanny Chio hurriedly reached out to support her. It's been nearly 10 days. That long guy will get the retribution he deserves in 3 days. I know Madam is eager to take revenge, but we can't be too hasty. I've waited long enough. Mu Qingya's eyes seemed to be flickering with light. She leaned against Nanny Chio and slowly stood up. She coughed a few times and wiped the blood from her lips. Long Shoshin deserves to die. Long Shoshin. Arbor couldn't help but be taken aback. Wasn't Long Shoshin the name of the head of the Long family branch in Long Yen City? Arbor had a big conflict with Long Shoshin's family at the palace banquet. After that, she had investigated the Long family quite a bit. Why did Mu Qingya say that Long Shoshin was trustworthy? Madam, this kind of thing can't be rushed. You're using the body of a mortal to do this Yen Xing technique. Now the backlash is not small. If you don't pay attention in time, Mu Qingya raised her hand to stop Nanny Chio. I've waited for so long. Finally, I've found a chance to take revenge. This time, I have to seize it no matter what. Mu Qingya took a deep breath and turned to look at Nanny Chio. Nanny, you'll help me, right? You will definitely help me. Yes, yes. Nanny Chio nodded repeatedly. If this little technique of mine can help Madam and let Madam untie the knot in her heart, then I will definitely help Madam without hesitation. Mu Qingya's eyes wandered as she stared at the small wooden table in front of her. Nanny Chio took a few steps forward and lifted the black cloth covering the object. A memorial tablet appeared in front of everyone, with the words Long Chuyun engraved on it. Fresh melons and fruits were placed in front of the memorial tablet. A small birch table was wiped clean and spotless. Mu Qingya quickly walked forward. With Nanny Chio's help, she knelt on the green futon in front of the birch table. Sister, if your spirit is in heaven, please bless me. This time, I must get rid of that traitor Long Shoshin. I'm not afraid of any hardships. I'm just worried that Long Shoshin will continue to get away with it. Sister. Mu Qingya took a few steps forward on her knees and looked at Long Chuyun's memorial tablet with gentle eyes. Don't worry. I will definitely protect Jojo for you. Chapter 3287. Madam, should we go and explain to Second Miss? No, don't try to explain. Mu Qingya quickly grabbed Nanny Chio's hand and shook her head. Jojo has been living in the lower star sector since she was a child, so it's understandable that she's so defensive. Let's not say anything. I believe that time will reveal a person's heart. One day, she'll know. Go and pack up. We'll come back tomorrow. Madam, you've already suffered a backlash. Why don't you stop for a day? No. Mu Qingya interrupted Nanny Chio sternly. It wasn't easy for me to get a death warrior planted in Long Mansion to steal that old thief's birth characters and sow the curse rune into his purse. I've done so much. I can't let all my efforts go to waste. So what if he has cultivation? He's still going to fall into our hands, Mu Qingya said coldly. There's only 3 days left. I can make him die without anyone knowing. At that time, others will only think that he was obsessed with cultivation and died from qi deviation. They won't suspect us at all. In short, Long Shoshin must die. I've tolerated him for long enough. Nanny Cho nodded. Yes, I'll do my best to help madam. Thank you, Nanny Cho. Mu Qingya looked back at her and took a deep breath. I believe that if sister's spirit is in heaven, she'll bless us with success. The two of them left the secret room, moved the wooden cabinet to its original position, and opened the door. Just as senior servant Chiu called out, Songlu, she saw a reckless little girl running over from not far away in the corridor. She tripped slightly in with a splash, a basin of cold water was splashed all over. Nanny Chiu's eyes sharpened. She raised her hand and waved her sleeve to brush away the water that was coming straight at her. But no matter how fast she moved, a portion of the water still splashed onto Madame Mu beside her. You're courting death. Nanny Chiu scolded angrily. In front of Arbor, the scene in the spirit energy circle formed by the demonic eye was gradually fading. Since the demonic pupil was soaked in water, the effects were naturally much worse. Arbor retracted his gaze and looked at Mo Yen blankly. Is Mu Qingya really my mother's good friend? Could it be that I really misunderstood her? Xiao Mu creased her small brows in bewilderment. Mo Yen couldn't help but laugh and hold her little hand. Alright, you're not allowed to worry about other people's matters. How about this, tomorrow I'll send someone to the Long family to ask around. Won't we know if Long Shoshin has been cursed by someone? Okay, Lien's Jojo, let's go to sleep now. I'm so sleepy. Mo Yen carried his little wife and got up and walked towards the bed. Sir Jojo looked at him expressionlessly. After a while, he said, make a defensive barrier. Mo Yen, I feel like there's a pair of eyes staring at us. Mo Yen turned around with the little fellow in his arms and used his divine perception to carefully check the room. He saw the candlelight flickering slightly. Behind a row of pine and bamboo screens was a large floor-to-ceiling vase decorated with beautiful patterns. Behind it was 100 treasures grid. Where were the eyes? Okay. Everything my little emperor says is right. Mo Yen casually set up a defensive barrier, then placed his darling on the bed and kissed her gently. Go to sleep. Chapter 3288. Lord Xiao Qiao narrowed her eyes, her furry little head burrowed into the man's embrace, and said in a small voice, if I've really wronged her, then I'll apologize to her. Mo Yen pursed his lips in amusement as he rubbed the little one's head. I know, my family's little emperor is the most considerate. Sir Jojo nodded his little head, stretched out a pair of slender arms, and hooked his waist as he whispered softly, Lotus. Remember to wake me up tomorrow morning, the next morning. Sir Jojo rolled out of bed, blinked his eyes, and looked around. His little face couldn't help but tense up. Where's Jojo's Lotus? Kai Chi, who was carrying toiletries into the room, couldn't help but smile when she heard this. The crown prince went to the palace early in the morning. Sir Jojo's little face tightened unhappily. Didn't I ask him to wake me up? Kai Chi used a lot of strength to maintain the expression on her face. His Highness did wake her up. But the crown princess was in a deep sleep, and no matter how hard he tried, she didn't wake up. Sir Jojo looked at Kai Chi and said expressionlessly, do you feel like laughing? Saichi vigorously shook her small head with an "n," but still said fearlessly, the Crown Prince Consort is still holding on to a strand of His Highness the Crown Prince's hair without letting go. In the end, His Highness had no choice but to cut his hair. Look, isn't it still in your hand? Sir Jojo looked down with an expressionless face. Sure enough, her white and clean little hand was still holding onto a strand of Jojo's lotus hair. Kai Chi said seriously. Before His Highness left, he kept shaking his head and muttering that if this goes on, he thinks he'll become bald sooner or later. The eunuchs and palace maids who were trying hard to keep a straight face couldn't help but let out a snort, and then quickly shut their mouths. The young crown prince consort hopped down from the bed expressionlessly. She casually found a brocade pouch and put Xiao Qiao's Lian's hair inside. She glanced at them from the corner of her eyes and pattered past them. After the little fellow finished washing his hands and rinsing his mouth, he turned to look at Kai Chi and said, "Prepare the carriage. I'm going to Prince Kang's mansion." "Yes." Kai Chi held back her laughter as she turned around and left in a hurry. The little crown princess glanced at the group of junior eunuchs and junior palace maids who had their heads lowered. She walked out with small steps and snorted. "If you want to laugh, then laugh. As soon as Jojo walks out of the room, you can laugh. Why hold it in?" Humph. The second branch of the Mu family had been bustling since early this morning. After the most outstanding young master of the second branch, Mu Erkshu, came back from the academy, the entire second branch was full of jubilation for several days in a row. They had even rewarded the servants several times. The old master's birthday banquet was getting closer and closer. Each branch was also busy raising funds and spending a lot of money to buy birthday gifts for the old master. Not only that, each branch also sent clever manservants to inquire each other about what gifts other people would give to the old master. The second branch was naturally no exception. Early in the morning, someone sent a message to the second branch's old master, saying that the expensive jade Buddha hand ordered by the fifth branch had arrived. The second branch's Madame, Chosher, pushed open the door to her daughter's room and walked in. At a glance, she saw her daughter who was wearing thin clothes and sitting in front of the dressing mirror. She was combing her hair and staring blankly at the mirror. These days, because her son came back, the house was very lively every day. She didn't pay attention to her daughter's difference. Chapter 3289. Today, she heard from Mama that 7th Miss hadn't left her room for 2 days. She couldn't help but suspect that her daughter was unwell because of the sudden change in weather. "Rose Xian, what are you doing? Why are you wearing so little and sitting in front of the mirror in a daze?" Madame Chiu frowned and walked to her daughter's side to tug at her. Mu Rose Xian returned to her senses and hurriedly stood up. "Mother." Madame Chiu poked her forehead. "I thought you were possessed, sitting in front of the dressing table in a daze. What's going on? Tell mother." "It's nothing." Mu Rose Xian pursed her lips and casually used a wooden comb to comb through her hair. Madame Chiu saw her bashful expression and her girlish demeanor. She couldn't help but be startled for a moment before smiling. "What is it? You can tell mother what's on your mind." "No, nothing's on my mind." Mu Rose Xian put down the wooden comb and her eyes darted around. She couldn't help but pull her mother to sit down. Twisting her body, she stammered, "Mother, can I ask you something?" "Go ahead." Madame Chiu couldn't help but laugh. "The entire second branch has been busy preparing for your grandfather's birthday banquet. Mother neglected you and didn't even know that my daughter is a young girl in love and has something on her mind. Mother, don't make fun of me." Mu Rose Xian blushed and shook her mother's hand. She thought for a moment and mustered her courage to ask, "Mother, I want to ask, that I heard that His Highness the Crown Prince is only in his early 20s but his cultivation is very impressive. Is that true?" Madame Chiu nodded and then looked at her daughter with a vigilant expression. She sized her up, and her heart sank for no reason. She recalled that her daughter had become reluctant to go out in the past 2 days. To be more precise, it was after returning from New South Garden. It couldn't be the object of her daughter's love was His Highness the Crown Prince, right? Madame Chio's heart instantly felt uneasy and her gaze was very vigilant as she looked sharply at Mu Xian. Xian, tell mother the truth. Why did you suddenly mention the crown prince? Could it be that you fell in love with him after seeing him once at New South Garden? Mother, what nonsense are you saying? Mu Xian was so embarrassed that her face turned crimson. She hurriedly covered her face and cried out. No, no, mother, don't speak nonsense. Madame Chio looked at her carefully and felt even more uneasy. His daughter had grown up. It was time to consider finding a match for her. In the past, Madame Chio had always thought that her daughter was still young. Besides, people in Shenzhou generally lived long lives, so it was not the time to talk about marriage. But now, it seemed that it was better to settle his daughter's marriage as soon as possible, so that she wouldn't keep thinking about nonsense. Qiushi said seriously, Xian, that day in New South Garden, you saw with your own eyes how His Highness the Crown Prince treated the Crown Princess. Even Miss Chen from the left Prime Minister's family was not able to enter the Crown Prince's eyes. Do you think you can do it? Don't ever do something you're not confident in. Otherwise, you'll waste time and hurt yourself. Qiushi said coldly, don't think that just because the Crown Prince listens to the Crown Princess wholeheartedly and is extremely good to her, that if you were in her place, perhaps you could also receive the Crown Prince's favor. You're not the Crown Princess. You'll never be her. It's extremely important to recognize your own status. Mu Xian's heart skipped a beat. She widened her eyes at her mother and couldn't help but tear up. Chapter 3290. Madame Chio's words to her could be said to be harsh. She had never seen her mother with such a stern face. How could she say this to her? Mother is saying this for your own good. Madame Chio sighed. The young lady's first awakening of love was not sensible and her thoughts were too simple. She only saw the Crown Prince's gentleness and hated that she couldn't replace the Crown Princess. However, she didn't know that the Crown Prince's gentleness was all because of the little Crown Princess. If it were her, that man might not even cast a cold glance at her from the corner of his eyes. Don't indulge in wild fantasies. Beautiful dreams definitely won't come true. You saw His Highness the Crown Prince treating the Crown Princess gently and doting on her like a pearl or a treasure. That's because the Crown Princess is beautiful enough to make one's heart ache. If it were you, His Highness the Crown Prince wouldn't even look at you. Madame Chio coldly threw down these words and stood up to walk out. Tidy up yourself and don't think about anything else in the future. Your grandfather's birthday banquet is only a few days away. Come out and help. Seeing Madame Chio walk out without looking back, Mu Ruian was so angry that she slapped a head ornament on the dressing table and it fell to the ground. Her personal maidservant, who had quickly walked in, was so scared that her face turned pale. She hurriedly stepped forward and looked at the broken head ornament on the ground in shock. Young miss, why did you break the head ornament? This is your favorite one. At this moment, Mu Xian's heart was bleeding. How could she have known that she would break her beloved jewelry in a fit of anger? While her heart was bleeding, she also felt grief and indignation. Being scolded by her mother like this, she felt ashamed and unconvinced at the same time. Why did her mother deny all the feelings she contributed when she first awakened of love? It was really laughable. Just because she and her father were married into a family, she didn't allow her daughter to awaken to love. Was there any mother who would say that about her own daughter? Why did she say that she was inferior to the Crown Princess? Empty words without any comparison. Since they had never crossed swords, how could she know that she was inferior? Mu Xian's slender fingers twisted together as she stood up and walked out quickly. Her personal maidservant hurriedly called out to her, "Little mistress, please slow down. You haven't changed your clothes yet." On the other side, Arbor's carriage had already arrived at the gate of Prince Kang's mansion. She had not sent a greeting card to Wang Fei. Thinking that she had been back for 2 days and had not come to visit Imperial Aunt, she could not help but come in a hurry. Imperial Aunt had taken the warm jade pill for a long time. Today, she came over to check her pulse and see if she could use acupuncture. Who would have thought that when she arrived at the door, she would coincidentally see Princess Consort Kong coming out, surrounded by people in front and behind, looking like she was about to go out. The little fellow had just come down from the carriage and met Princess Consort Kong, who had just come out of the door. Both of them were stunned. Princess Consort Kang's eyes instantly lit up, and she quickly walked forward with a big smile. She laughed and said, "I was wondering why there was a magpie chirping outside my door so early in the morning. So it's because our family's Jojo is coming. Ha ha ha, I was just about to go to the Eastern Palace to look for you. I didn't expect you to come over." Princess Consort Kong was extremely happy. She went forward and hooked her arm around Arbor's small arm, smiling intimately as she said, "Quick, let Imperial Aunt take a look. She's gotten thinner after going to the academy." Arbor could not help but be speechless. "No, how has she gotten thinner? I heard that your Imperial Academy's principal is quite stingy. His usual meals are also not that great." Chapter 3291. Sir Jojo's eyes lit up. "Who did you hear that from?" "It's true. Dean Yun was a miser and greedy person. Even a school uniform could be sold at a sky-high price. Who else could I have heard it from? I just heard some gossip from your Imperial Uncle. Imperial Uncle is so insightful." Arbor nodded her little head in all seriousness. Lu Lanyun couldn't help but burst into laughter when she saw this. "Let's go in and chat with Imperial Aunt. I haven't seen you in a long time. You have to stay here tonight and listen to Imperial Aunt." The young crown princess blinked. She had just raised a small hand when Princess Consort Kong pulled it down. "I'll find someone to inform the crown prince later. I'm borrowing his wife for a night. He can't be so stingy as to refuse, right?" As she said this, she couldn't help but burst into laughter first. The young crown princess tilted her head in thought, then nodded and said, "All right. Then I'll have to trouble Imperial Aunt." What trouble is there?" "Imperial Aunt can't ask for more," Princess Consort Kong said with a wide grin. "Imperial Aunt, I'll take your pulse in a bit." Yesterday, the old prince told Lien that all the materials on the list of medicinal ingredients have been found. Let's take a look in a bit. If your body's condition permits, we can begin the acupuncture treatment. Okay. Lu Lanyun nodded repeatedly and said with a chuckle, "There's no rush. Let's have a good chat first." Older sister. The two of them were intimately holding hands as they walked into the estate when they heard a soft and weak call from behind them. Arbor clearly felt Princess Consort Kang's arm around her stiffen slightly, and her body involuntarily tensed up. She couldn't help but frown. She turned around with Princess Consort Kong to look at a delicate woman who was walking down from a carriage. She was dressed in white silk with a small white flower in her hair. This woman was like a willow branch swaying in the wind. Her palm-sized face was filled with tears. Before she spoke, tears had already streamed down her face. Arbor only felt Princess Consort Kang's body tense up even more. She pursed her lips and didn't say a word. Elder sister. That weak and helpless woman looked pitifully at Princess Consort Kong. She said softly, "Sorry to disturb you. It's just that elder sister knows about my current situation. After my late husband passed away, I was chased out by his whole family. I really had nowhere to go, so I could only come and look for my sister." Lu Lanyun's face looked terrible. Arbor couldn't help but look at the delicate woman curiously. This woman looked delicate and weak, as if she would be blown away by a gust of wind. Tears flowed down her cheeks before she spoke. Standing at the entrance of Prince Kang's Fu, she looked so pitiful that the passers-by could not help but cast their gazes on her. Those who didn't know better would think that Princess Kang had bullied this woman and made her cry non-stop at the entrance of Prince Kang's mansion. The head maidservant of the Wang Fei, Danling, stepped forward with a cold smile and stood in front of the weak woman. She said in a neutral tone, "Third young lady, third young master suddenly passed away. Our Wang Fei has already sent people to express her condolences. She also sent consolation money and arranged for people to send third young lady back to Lu family." Why did third young lady come to Prince Kang's Fu instead of returning to Lu family? Your maternal family is Lu family, not our Prince Kang's Fu. Danling couldn't help but roll her eyes. The old madam of Lu family was truly a weirdo. Or rather, she was someone whose mind was already biased to the heavens. She clearly knew that this younger daughter's actions were wrong, but she still tacitly allowed her to come to Prince Kang's Fu to look for her Wang Fei. She glorified it by saying that her late husband had passed away and that she had no relatives to rely on to seek shelter from her older sister. Chapter 3292. Fuck, don't you have a maternal family? Your biological mother, old Madame Lu, isn't dead yet. Do you need to seek refuge with older sister? Her intentions are truly obvious. Danling couldn't help but roll her eyes. She then gave a look to the two young maidservants behind her before walking up to tug at the delicate woman. Third young miss, the wind is strong here. Don't get a headache from the wind again. This servant will have someone send you back. Older sister. The delicate woman looked at Princess Consort Kang with tears in her eyes, looking helpless and melancholic. It was as if Princess Consort Kang would commit an unpardonable crime if she didn't take her in. Princess Consort Kang was utterly disgusted. She immediately turned her head away and said coldly, "Send third young miss back." Woo-woo, older sister. The delicate woman wiped her tears with a handkerchief and cried out mournfully, "Older sister, I know you hate me, but Lanxin has no other choice. That's why I came to find you. If it weren't for the fact that my husband's family couldn't tolerate a weak woman like me, why would I come to beg for older sister's mercy?" Princess Consort Kang turned to glare at her. "I had someone send you to the Lu estate, but you came to my place to cry and make a fuss. Others might think that the Lu estate couldn't tolerate you either." "Aunt, what are you talking about?" A girl in her early 20s popped out from the delicate woman's side. She stomped her feet and said indignantly, "It was maternal grandmother who sent us here to find Aunt. It's not like we had to come here to look for trouble." Princess Consort Kang was instantly angered into laughter. She looked coldly at the mother and daughter and said, "Since you've lost your husband, it's fine if you go back to your maternal home. But you came to me, your older sister. Do you want to do something like 20 years ago and stir up trouble again?" Princess Consort Kang didn't expect that Lu Lanxin still hadn't completely given up on the old prince. She was both amused and angry. She was truly blessed. That's why he ended up with such a top-grade mother and sister. 20 years ago, Lu Lanxin had caused a farce. On the day of her wedding, Lu Lanxin brought her a bowl of ginseng soup the next night. Fortunately, she had always been on guard against this little sister. She didn't dare to drink it and pretended to faint. In the end, her good sister was so naive that she thought of the play of changing the bride before the bridal sedan chair. She planned to make her faint and replace her, happily going to the prince's mansion to be the mistress of the house. The farce of the Lu family was laughed at for 3 whole years. Every time Princess Consort Kang thought about it, she couldn't help but have a headache. Lu Lanxin looked at Princess Consort Kang with a pale face. She trembled all over like a little white flower shivering in the wind. She cried pitifully, "Sister, what are you saying? It's been 20 years, why are you still brooding over it? I really didn't expect big sister to be such a person." Lu Lanxin wiped her tears and said, "There are some things that I can't say here. Why don't we go into the mansion first?" Princess Consort Kang looked coldly at the little white flower in front of her. I, Lu Lanyun, am an upright person. There's nothing to hide. If you have anything to say it here. Enter the mansion. In your dreams. Don't even think about entering the mansion in this lifetime. Seeing her resolute attitude, a trace of coldness flashed through Lu Lanxin's eyes. Then, she sobbed and said intermittently, "This is also mother's intention. Big sister has been childless for so many years. We can't let the old prince die without an heir." She sobbed and said pitifully, "I'm sorry." Chapter 3293. Although I've adopted Lu Iran from my sister-in-law, I'm still raising him. Lu Lanxin sniffed and pretended to wipe her tears with a handkerchief. She stole a glance at Lu Lanyun. She continued, "But there's no heir to the prince's mansion. Although I've had a hard life, I'm still a woman with a son and a daughter. If you want to adopt our Zongbao, it's not impossible." Lu Lanyun was so angry that she laughed. It seemed that the mother and children had already planned this out. They wanted to bring their families into the prince's mansion. They wanted to start with the prince's stepsons and stepdaughters, and then the family of 3 would become the new masters of the prince's mansion, right? She did not have a son, but why did she have to adopt Huang Yubao, a good-for-nothing who was almost 20 years old and had a bad reputation? She must have eaten her fill and had nothing else to do. Would it not be better for her to choose a baby from any of the Mo family's royal relatives to raise? She wanted to choose someone with a different surname, and such an unreliable playboy at that. He was already so old. Could he still be of one mind with her in the future? It was so funny. Princess Consort Kong sneered. Before she could speak, the little crown princess frowned and said, "What nonsense are you talking about? People in China generally live long lives. What's wrong with imperial aunt living for a few hundred years? Just because she doesn't have children now doesn't mean she won't have children in the future. As long as imperial aunt takes care of her body, she can have as many children as she wants in less than 2 years. Why should she adopt your child? Are you kidding me?" Lu Lanxin heard the crisp voice and could not help but be stunned. Then, she cast a displeased glance at Arbor. Huang Yubao, who was casually standing beside his mother and sister and playing with the horsewhip in his hand, looked over when he heard the voice. With one look, his eyes widened in shock, and the horsewhip in his hand fell to the ground with a clatter. On the other hand, Princess Consort Kong couldn't resist becoming slightly agitated. She pulled over Qiao Mu's small hand while secretly restraining her emotions. She asked softly, Qiao, is what you said true?" Of course it's true. In the past, Wang Fei's body was too cold to conceive. Now that she had taken the warm jade pill, her body should have improved a lot. In the future, I will perform acupuncture for another half a year. Wang Fei's body will only get better and better. When I said 2 years, I was talking about a long time. If nothing goes wrong, she should be able to conceive in a year or so. This time, Lu Lanyun was truly moved. Tears welled up in her eyes. "Good child, I believe in you." Hearing this, Lu Lanxin felt very uncomfortable. She sneered at the princess consort and said, "Sister, don't be so naive. Don't trust a child too much. Look at her age. For her to be able to say such exaggerated words, it must be mostly boasting." Lu Lanxin pursed her lips and pretended to wipe her tears with a handkerchief. "Don't you know what your body looked like since you were young? If that cold disease was so easy to cure, it would have been cured decades ago. As soon as I heard it, I knew that this child was lying. How could you believe that? She's just a child. Is she going to help you nurse your body back to health? Can she nurse you back to health that you've had for decades? That's the biggest joke in the world. Only someone as naive as you would believe it." The princess consort sneered. "I believe in Jojo's medical skills. If she says she can, then she can." Chapter 3294. Lu Lanxin sobbed and said with a pitiful look, "Sister, please don't be so willful anymore. Haven't you been willful enough in the past few decades? Do you really want the prince mansion to have no descendants because of you?" The princess's face suddenly changed, and she glared angrily at the blabbermouth woman in front of her. "I'm doing and saying these things for your own good. If you weren't my sister, I wouldn't be bothered to say these intimate words to you. Sister, although the old prince is good to you, you can't take this for granted. Which man in the world doesn't care about children? You haven't had a child for many years. Although the old prince doesn't say it, I don't believe he doesn't have any thoughts about it. If you adopt our Yubao, you'll have a son in the future, won't you? In the future, you'll be able to hold your head up high in front of those royal relatives. They won't be so thick-skinned as to force you to take in those children who are far away from you, right?" The princess sneered, "So, I should be grateful to you as my sister." Lu Lanxin wiped her tears, "We don't need to be so polite between us. I'm just thinking that you and I are sisters. We're related by blood. If I don't help you, then no one else in this world can." Sir Jojo listened on the side, and he was almost disgusted by the woman in front of him. Why did this woman have to rush the princess to adopt her son who was already so old? He had already told her that the princess would have her own children in the future, but she didn't seem to understand what others were saying. She just kept nagging as if she knew everything. So annoying. "Lu Lanxin, you and I know what you're planning. You don't have to pretend to cry here." The princess sneered, "Go back to your Lu family. Don't tell me now that I know Lu Feng and I can have our own children. Even if we can't, we won't adopt your Huang Yubao. Give up." Sister." Lu Lanxin twisted the handkerchief in her hand and took 2 steps forward. "How can you say that, sister? I'm doing this for you. Do you think I'm doing this for myself? It's you who doesn't have a son, not me. Seeing that we're sisters, I agreed to entrust Yubao to you. What are you waiting for?" How could he let this blabbermouth woman cry and kick up a fuss in front of the Prince Yu's mansion? "Hit him." Arbor suddenly raised his small arm. The servants of the prince's mansion on both sides immediately rushed forward like a swarm of bees, as if they were wooden men who had been triggered by a mechanism. "Oh my God, I've long found this little widow an eyesore. Now that I've received the crown princess order, how could I not be overjoyed?" Like a swarm of bees, the servants all rushed forward. In a flurry, they raised their sticks and shovels and smashed them on the heads of the mother and children. Bang, 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 bang. Chaos ensued, mixed with the little white flowers crying and shrieking. "Elder sister, Io, elder sister, what are you doing, elder sister? Hey, don't hit me. Sigh. Io, elder sister." Arbor looked at the scene in front of her expressionlessly. She pulled Princess Kong and turned to walk into the door. "Elder sister, tell them to stop." Ah. Elder sister, ah. Chapter 3295. The gate of the prince's mansion was immediately closed. Lu Lanxin and her children were beaten up by the servants of the prince's mansion. They ran into the carriage as if they were escaping and ordered someone to drive the carriage away from the prince's mansion as soon as possible. Not long after the carriage left, a wicked servant of Prince Kang's mansion picked up a ball of horse dung and pasted it on the window. Lu Lanxin and her daughter, Huang Wuxia, screamed and cried in each other's arms. "Mother, Aunt has changed. How did she become so snobbish and treat us like this?" Huang Wuxia screamed. Lu Lanxin also cried and said with tears in her eyes, "Let's go back and ask your grandmother for justice. I was thinking, how can there be such justice in the world? She doesn't know how to appreciate kindness. We went to help her, but she beat us up and drove us out. The older she gets, the more disrespectful she becomes." Huang Wuxia smoothed her messy hair and paused when she heard the word bold. "Mother, don't you think that Aunt seems to have become prettier?" Did you notice that she seems to have become 20 years younger? Hey, do you think it's possible that she'll really be able to give birth to a son like that wretched lass said? Bah! She's already so old and she still wants to give birth to a son. Ha! Lu Lanxin twisted her thin lips harshly. She's destined to die without a son. She shamelessly stole my prince. Now, she can't give birth to a son for decades and still wants to keep that man. If she's the second meanest person in the world, no one is the first. Even though Lu Lanxin said that, she still felt a little jealous. She naturally saw Lu Lanyan's change. Not only did she become slimmer, but she also became prettier and younger. Her delicate skin was comparable to a young girl's. How was this possible? She had to go out and find out what was going on. For the past 2 years, she had been detained at home by that wretched person and had to take care of that wretched tuberculosis ghost. Her news was lagging behind. Now that she finally hoped that guy would rise to the heavens, she had to fight for a good future for herself. Arbor pulled the princess consort in and closed the door. He helped the princess consort to sit on the stool. Princess consort, you can't be so nice. To deal with those bitches, you have to be more ruthless than them. The head maidservant Dan Ling's mouth was slightly agape as she hurriedly nodded her head. Your Highness, the crown princess is absolutely right. Since conciliation doesn't work, I'll just beat him up a few more times. I'll beat them up every time they come. After the 3rd time, let's see if they still dare to come and cause trouble. But I've always thought that we still have to take into account the reputation of the prince's mansion. How much is face worth? Xiao Mu rolled her eyes and directly sat down next to her. How unpleasant is it to keep feeling stifled in your heart? A person's life can be as short as 100 years or as long as 1,000 years. How much time do you have to squander with those bitches? Just remember my words. If someone makes you uncomfortable, you have to make her uncomfortable 100 times more. That's all. At the side, Dan Ling's little head was about to fall off. Her eyes were bright as she looked at the young crown prince consort. She felt that the crown prince consort's words were too reasonable. She hurriedly went forward to pour 2 cups of water, handing one to Wang Fei and the other to the crown prince consort. She hurriedly slandered, Wang Fei, this servant feels that the crown prince consort's words are too reasonable. Think about it. For so many years, that old lady has been doing unreliable things. How can our prince's mansion maintain its reputation? Chapter 3296. Look at the crown princess. After a violent beating, she immediately chased that family of 3 away. That's the right thing to do. You should have done this long ago. If you keep indulging them, they'll take advantage of you instead. Danling said repeatedly. The princess consort couldn't help but glance at her in amusement. She looked down at the teacup in her hand and stuffed it into Danling's hand. I think you're the one who needs to drink some water to moisten your throat. Saying so much in one go, how long had she held it in? She wouldn't be happy if she didn't spit it out, would she? Danling pursed her lips and took a step back with the teacup in her hand. Arbor continued, Danling is right. Princess consort, from the looks of it, that mother and children might come to make a fuss tomorrow. Let me tell you, we have to think of a way to settle this once and for all. Otherwise, you'll be annoyed in the future. Right. Danling nodded furiously like a chick pecking at rice. She hurriedly interrupted, Crown Princess, help our princess consort. Give her some ideas and think of a way to keep that family of 3 out forever. This servant is really disgusted every time I see them. If it gets serious, this servant can't even eat. Princess Consort Kong looked at her speechlessly. Alright, don't bring up these troublesome matters. Jojo, let's not talk about this. The princess consort smiled and took her little hand. Let's go, I'll take you to the back garden for a stroll. Arbor nodded his little head. The princess consort suddenly thought of something and turned to look at her. Jojo, I have a presumptuous request. I want to buy another beautifying pill. Imperial Aunt, one beautifying pill is enough. It's useless to eat more. Arbor glanced at her and said. Hey, it's not me who wants to buy it. It's that good-for-nothing sister-in-law of mine. Princess consort. Danling immediately dodged. I said not to meddle in their family's affairs, but you still meddle. The princess consort gave her a sidelong glance. She knew Lu Hashir's character better than anyone else. He was definitely not evil or treacherous. He was just a little stingy, greedy for small gains, and not magnanimous. For the sake of her elder brother, she wanted to help her if she could. You should have seen her that day. The princess consort smiled awkwardly. The one who stopped your car at the entrance of Zhenhua workshop. Oh. Now that Princess Kong mentioned it, Arbor remembered. She was the plump woman who kept saying that she was Princess Kang's sister-in-law. My sister-in-law mainly wants to put on some weight. Princess Kong coughed softly and said, I think she has been putting on too much weight recently. When I saw her 2 years ago, she wasn't that fat. Recently, she's like a cabbage that's been injected with catalysts. The longer she grows, the stranger she becomes. Dan Ling, who was following behind the two of them, twitched her mouth when she heard that. Sometimes, the princess consort's words were quite sarcastic. Oh. Arbor nodded and turned to look at Wang Fei. That Lu Hashir. Ah, that's her. She's so fat. You must remember her. Her sister-in-law's fatness was completely different from her middle-aged fatness back then. She's not fat. Arbor shook her head and said with a serious expression, she's poisoned. Ah. Princess Kong paused in her steps and turned to look at Arbor. She's not fat. You said she's poisoned? Yes. Sir Jojo nodded with a serious expression. I noticed it that day when she jumped into my car. Chapter 3297. Her obesity can't be cured by the beautifying pill alone. She has to be detoxified first. Princess Consort Kong looked astonished. She's just a woman of the inner residence and doesn't have much cultivation. Who wanted to make things difficult for her and poisoned her? Xiao Mu shrugged her shoulders. This was not something she could manage. I can give you the detoxification pill. Arbor took out a detoxification pill and handed it to the princess consort. Then he said, that day, she said she had money and was willing to pay several times the price for my beautifying pill. The princess consort, don't worry, Jojo. I'll just let that stingy sister-in-law of mine bleed. She would only cherish it if she bought it at a high price, right? When night fell, Mo Lien and the old prince returned to the prince's residence together. As soon as he entered the main hall, he saw his little wife sitting upright and still. She was holding a porcelain cup in her hand and her round eyes were looking in his direction. When she saw him, she pretended not to see him and turned her little head away with a whoosh. Prince Mo was immediately amused. He quickly ran over and reached out to hug his wife. Good evening, Jojo. Your husband hasn't seen you for a day and misses you very much. Humph. The little fellow threw the back of his head at him. Mo Lien smiled and turned her little body around. Jojo, what did your husband do to make you unhappy? You didn't wake me up when you left. Mo Lien curled his lips and bent down to rub against her delicate neck. Heaven and earth can bear witness, the sun and moon can bear witness. At that time, I called Xiao Qiao 7 to 8 times, but Xiao Qiao ignored this hubby. Lady Xiao Qiao looked at him expressionlessly. She moved her small body and raised her hand to push his face. She said hesitantly, my wood spirit energy has an exuberant vitality. It can help you grow your hair. Mo Lien laughed out loud. His little wife, how could she think of anything? Then if I use my wood spiritual energy to grow hair, will your husband's hair continue to grow out of the main hall? That's possible. Arbor thought for a moment, then put down his little hand and patted Prince Mo's head. Forget it then. At the side, the old Wang Yi sneakily glanced at the lovey-dovey couple. He lowered his voice and said to the Wang Fei, "Why did you trick the little girl here again? Hey, you didn't see how anxious that little brat was. She didn't even return to the Mu family and directly boarded this prince's carriage, insisting on coming back with me. I didn't invite him." The old prince pursed his lips. Wang Fei giggled and pulled on the old Wang Ye's hand as they walked towards the two. "Crown Prince, Wang Yi, go change first. You'll be able to eat dinner in a bit. Go change your clothes." The little fellow reached out and patted his chest with a look of disdain. Prince Mo couldn't help but laugh. He lowered his head and kissed her hard when she wasn't paying attention. Then, he winked and said, "Jojo, something interesting happened in court today. I'll tell you about it later." After saying that, he went to his room to change his clothes. Half an hour later, the four of them sat down at a small round table in the dining room to eat. The old Wang Yi roared loudly, "I heard from the steward that Lu Lanxin came to make a fuss today. How did you deal with her? She didn't make things difficult for you, did she?" Princess Consort Kong looked at him speechlessly. "How could she make things difficult for me? She's just a newly bereaved widow. She can't make things difficult for me." "Humph," the old Wang Yi snorted in annoyance. "Her husband just died, and she's just a widow. Isn't she ashamed to run out of the house every few days?" Chapter 3298. On the side, Dan Ling was serving food to them and hastily said, "Thankfully, Crown Prince Consort gave the order for the retainers to chase that mother and children away. Otherwise, who knows how long they would have made a ruckus." "Chased away?" The elderly prince was startled, and then he laughed out loud. Good, they should have been beaten up long ago." Princess Consort Kong brusquely glanced at the prince before saying with a smile, "What's the point of saying those senseless things in front of the child? All right, let's eat." "I didn't cook fish soup today," the elderly prince quietly grumbled. "I cooked it." Princess Consort Kong glanced at him in amusement and annoyance. "I wonder why the kitchen hasn't brought it over yet." "Then go take a look." The elderly prince repeatedly urged, "Go take a look at the kitchen and see if those servants are slacking off." "All right, I'll go take a look right now." Princess Consort Kong was helpless against him, so she could only stand up and leave the small sitting room. Arbor glanced at the princess consort's departing figure before turning to look at the elderly prince. "What do you want to say by purposely sending the princess consort away?" The elderly prince hastily shifted his stool over a bit and simply sat next to Arbor. He quietly said, "Little stoic, let me tell you something. Tomorrow, that Lu family will definitely come to make a ruckus. I'm telling you, since you have nothing better to do, just stay in this prince estate. At that time, you can help royal uncle beat them up." "Royal uncle, have you wanted to beat them for a long time?" The elderly prince nodded repeatedly. "Your royal aunt's mother is an old muddlehead. She's especially unreliable when doing things. Help me look after your royal aunt, and I'll gift Huangji rice shop to you later. How about it?" The little stoic nodded her small head, and the two immediately exchanged a tacit glance. Mo Lien, who was squeezed to the side, couldn't help but laugh. "Royal uncle, auntie will be back soon. You should quickly return to your seat." This brat was truly a hindrance. The elderly prince disdainfully glanced at Prince Mo before winking at the little stoic. "Jojo, that, cough, the old prince looked like he was constipated. He held it in for a long time without saying a complete sentence. He anxiously looked outside, as though he was waiting to see if Wang Fei would coincidentally enter the door. "Ahem, about that. Your Highness, please say it quickly." Arbor rolled his eyes. He felt tired listening to his father's stammering. Isn't that your auntie, recently, that, took the beautifying pill you gave her, right? Then, I look different every day. Ah, I'm becoming more and more young and beautiful. You don't like it? Arbor had already guessed what he wanted to say, but he just kept teasing him with an expressionless face. Ah, no, that's not what I meant. The old prince glanced outside again and said in a low voice, what I mean is, that beautifying cream of yours, is it useful for us men? Mo Yen almost spat out a mouthful of soup. Oh my, uncle, can you please give me a warning before you tell me a joke? The little stoic small face was taut as she asked in deadly earnest, Your Highness, do you want beautifying? The elderly prince glanced at his personal pageboy, who had his head lowered and shoulders trembling. He waved his hand and shooed him away. Go laugh outside. I'm not joking with you. Don't you also know? In the past, I ate that aging pill. My appearance, has aged quite a bit. Isn't that your royal aunt is becoming more and more youthful? Chapter 3299. When the pitiful prince discovered that his wife was becoming more and more delicate and beautiful, he felt like he was her father when he stood next to his wife. He truly felt extremely stifled. He had to think of a way to change this situation. Hence, this guy immediately thought of Mo Yen's wife. That beautifying ointment is useless on men. If His Highness wants beautifying, I have an ointment here that is also useful for men. Hey, then, give it. The elderly prince poked the little stoic's arm. Hurry up, don't keep it to yourself. Give Uncle Emperor a jar. If it's useful later, I'll sell it to you. It's not impossible to cheat Giant Pain. Arbor, you really are the Prince of Giant Pain's biological older brother. Here, take it and use it. I guarantee that you'll be 10 years younger within 3 months. In the future, don't foolishly take that aging pill again. Arbor glanced outside the window, the corners of his mouth turning up slightly. Hey, lower your voice. The elderly prince hastily put away the men's beautifying ointment and sneakily glanced outside the door. After a while, the princess consort walked in, but her eyes were a bit red. She sat next to the elderly prince and cast him a sidelong glance before saying with a smile, Come, bring in the fish soup. Jojo, Auntie will scoop a bowl for you. Auntie, we can start the acupuncture tomorrow. I checked on Auntie today. Her body is recovering well. Good. The elderly prince said happily, then you stay at home tomorrow to accompany your auntie. I'll go to the palace to answer a call. If there's nothing else, I'll come back earlier. Do you know how to play horse divinity games? Tomorrow, the 4 of us will play horse divinity games. I'm telling you, I've never lost in horse divinity games. It was night, and the moonlight was like water. After Arbor finished bathing, he sat next to the window and gazed at the night sky. He listened to the gentle wind rustling the leaves outside. His Highness is really happy today. Mo Yen walked out with a smile while drying her wet hair. That's right, I found out about Long Shoshin. Mo Yen put down the towel in her hand and raised her hand to dry her long hair. Then, she sat down beside Arbor and held her little hand. He really hasn't been doing well recently. It's said that his chest and head have been hurting a lot, but they can't find the reason. Everyone in the family said that he was too eager to practice martial arts, which caused his meridians to be blocked. Arbor raised his delicate eyebrows and nodded. Then it seems that the cursed talisman worked. I didn't expect that Mrs. Mu would really avenge your mother-in-law. Mo Yen said, I'll get someone to keep an eye on the Long family. If there's any movement, we'll know immediately. Yes. Arbor nodded and leaned his head against his chest. One day, the clouds will part and the sun will shine. Yes. Mo Lien reached out to brush away the hair on her forehead and looked around. Do you have that feeling today? Arbor shook her head. Today, I feel lighter all over. That creepy feeling of being stared at has disappeared. This was also why she agreed to let Princess Kong move into the prince's estate. She wanted to test if she would still have that feeling of being stared at if she stayed at Prince Kang's estate. As it turned out, she didn't. Then it seems that there's something strange about the Mu family. Mo Lien naturally trusted his little wife's intuition. Intuition was something that couldn't be explained clearly, but he trusted his Jojo unconditionally. Chapter 3300. Xiao Mu busied herself inside Paradise Planet the entire night and made a lot of pills. She then chatted with Mayan, that fellow, for a bit before running out of Paradise Planet. At this time, the sky was already bright. Arbor didn't sleep for an entire night, but she was still full of energy. Thinking that she didn't feel sleepy, she didn't want to go back to Fish Orchid Planet to catch up on sleep. When she was in the Mu family, she always felt that there was an invisible pair of eyes watching her, so she was cautious and didn't enter Paradise Planet. It was only when she came to Prince Kang's residence that she entered Paradise Planet. The enhanced warm jade pill she made for Imperial Ant took half a year to refine. In the short term, she should be fine. After that, she would give Imperial Ant acupuncture treatment once a month and take the enhanced warm jade pill continuously. She wasn't bragging, but perhaps she would be fine in half a year. Maybe by the end of the year, Jojo's Lotus would have a white and chubby little brother. After thinking for a while, Arbor's little face couldn't help but redden. She then called Kai Xiu to come in and help her dress up. Today, she changed into a bright red battle suit. According to the old prince's speculation, the Lu family would probably come to make a fuss today. She had to protect Imperial Ant well. Speaking of this battle suit, the clothes from Nikhang Market were indeed a little expensive, but the craftsmanship was really good. The few colors that were stitched together were also to her liking. Jojo Darren stepped out of the door and coincidentally bumped into Lu Yiran, who was strolling in. Lu Yiran's expression suddenly changed. Why are you here? Lu Yiran went to visit a good sister yesterday and only just returned. She had just returned to the Fu and hadn't heard the servants mention that the Crown Prince Consort was staying overnight in the Wang Fu. As a result, when she saw the young Crown Prince Consort, she wasn't mentally prepared at all and was truly shocked. Lu Yiran's reaction was too agitated. The servant girl beside her hurriedly went forward and secretly tugged at her, giving her a look. The other party was the Crown Princess. Lu Yiran really didn't know what this Miss Lu was thinking, to actually ask such a rude question. Since the Crown Princess had appeared in the Wang Fu at this time, then Wang Fei must have asked her to stay. Arbor couldn't be bothered to pay attention to her. He didn't even bother to look at her from the corner of his eye. He just brushed past her. Lu Yiran's expression changed, and without thinking, she reached out to grab Arbor's wrist. What are you doing here again? Ever since she met the Crown Princess, Lu Yiran felt that she had never had a good day. His Highness and His Highness loved this young Crown Prince Consort so much that they loved her even more than their adopted daughter. What right did she have to be the only one doted on by the Prince and Princess Consort and steal all the benefits from her? Previously, Wang Yi had gifted the land within 100 li of Half Moon Cliff to the young Crown Prince Consort without batting an eye, as well as the 5 prosperous shops in the capital, the exquisite fire brocade bracelet that Wang Fei had given her, and so on. When Lu Yiran thought about how these things originally belonged to her, but they all fell into the hands of this stoic face for no reason, she felt her heart clench. It was so painful that she almost couldn't breathe. That Crown Princess was too shameless. She came to the Wang Fu with the intention of swindling things out of them. The more Lu Yiran looked at this young Crown Prince Consort, the more she looked like a relative who had come to ask for money. Her eyes stared sharply at the Crown Prince Consort's back, as though she wanted nothing more than to pierce a hole through her back. Arbor had already noticed this woman's resentful expression, and she couldn't help but frown slightly. She abruptly turned around, and her icy gaze landed on Luyiran's face. Poor Luyiran was currently glaring at the crown princess and was caught off guard when she turned around. When she met the little crown princess' cold gaze, Luyiran was instantly defeated. Chapter 3301. How could she possibly look the young crown princess in the eye for an extended period of time? There was no harm without comparison. She originally thought that her gaze was sharp enough, but the moment she met the young crown princess, all of her sharpness turned into bubbles and shadows. The moment she saw this stoic face's expressionless appearance, she couldn't help but feel apprehensive from the bottom of her heart. The corners of Luyiran's mouth twitched slightly with sweat on her face, and she appropriately adjusted her stiff facial expression. "Gee, Crown Princess, why are you looking at me like that?" Arbor glanced at her coldly and then said, "Miss Lu, it was you who kept staring at me with a strange gaze just now." Luyiran was actually a bit speechless. She secretly gritted her teeth, pinched the handkerchief in her hand, and said with a feigned smile, "I was thinking that since the crown princess is living in the estate, I ought to, perform the duties of a host." "Crown princess, please." Luyiran's expression suddenly changed under the constant tugging of her sleeve by the maidservant behind her, and she forced a smile. However, that smile was too fake. When it hung on her face, it looked like a layer of paper had been drawn on, and it was even prettier when she didn't smile. Arbor expressionlessly glanced at her before turning around and walking towards the antechamber. Luyiran secretly shook off her personal maidservant's hand and quickly followed after her. She asked with a fake smile, "Crown Princess, pardon me for asking, but does the Crown Prince know that you've come to Prince Kang's estate just like that? Would the Eastern Palace allow you to come and go as you please? Even if the Crown Prince allowed you to live in the estate, what would the Emperor think if this matter were to reach his ears?" The Crown Princess was walking so closely with Prince Kang's estate, so she probably had some sort of scheme in mind. Luyiran's red lips curled slightly, presumptuously trying to figure out the Emperor's thoughts. "My Lien naturally came with me." Arbor expressionlessly replied. "That's right, the Crown Prince has to be informed." What? When Luyiran reached the end of her sentence, her voice suddenly rose by an octave. "His Highness the Crown Prince followed you into the estate. Is there a problem?" Arbor glanced at her, scrunched up his pink little face, and unhappily glanced at Luyiran. It was really annoying for him to shout in Lord Xiao Qiao's ear with all his fuss. "I don't think this is a good idea." Luyiran furrowed her brows and forced a smile. "Although the Crown Princess does as she pleases, she still has to consider your highness in everything she does." Luyiran was just short of saying to his face, "You always let the Crown Prince leave the Eastern Palace with you, going back to your maiden home one moment and jumping around the prince's estate the next. It's really not good." Arbor gave her a sideways glance and said confidently, "He's my husband. Wherever I go, he has to go with me. What's wrong with that?" Luyiran stared dumbfounded at the weirdo in front of her. "Could it be that your identity has been swapped? In their divine land, not to mention the Crown Prince's noble status, even a commoner with a high cultivation in Jianghu had the right to speak in front of women. What kind of godly logic did the little Crown Princess have? What did she mean by His Highness the Crown Prince had to follow her?" Arbor couldn't be bothered with this Luyiran anymore. He muttered, "You're crazy." Then, he took small steps and walked towards the front hall. It was really too much to say when they didn't see eye to eye. He didn't know what this Luyiran was thinking. If her husband didn't follow her back to her maiden home and didn't follow her everywhere, was he still her, Jojo's husband? Chapter 3302. Luyiran's expression was somewhat dazed, her mind still digesting Arbor's words. There was too much information in those words. It meant that His Highness the Crown Prince obeyed this weirdo's every command. His Highness the Crown Prince followed her wherever she liked. Since when did the status of women in the divine mainland become so high? Lu Yiran followed Arbor blindly. When she turned the corner from the corridor to the front hall, she saw two maids carrying buckets of water and bending over to wipe the corridor pole. Lu Yiran's eyes turned slightly. She quickly walked forward and pushed away the hands of the maids behind her who hurriedly tried to stop her. She abruptly kicked those buckets of water. The buckets splashed with water, splashing straight at the back of Arbor's head. Arbor did not even turn her head. She slightly raised her small hand. A large transparent water droplet suddenly emerged from the top of her head. That water droplet suddenly grew small arms and legs. Its eyes abruptly opened, and before Lu Yiran could react, it threw a punch at the water splashing at her. Bang! The water bucket, along with the gushing water, splashed back at him. That wooden bucket even landed on Lu Yiran's head with a clang. She was so frightened and angry that she started crying on the spot. She overestimated herself. Xiao Mu did not even spare her a glance out of the corner of her eye. She turned around the corridor and walked straight to the anteroom, slowly entering it. Lu Yiran sobbing behind her had long been tossed to the back of her mind. She saw many exquisite pastries on the table, as well as food like porridge and noodles. When Princess Consort Kong saw her enter, she could not help but smile and wave at her. "Jojo, come quickly. Breakfast is ready. Eat it while it's hot." Arbor took small steps and sat down at the table. "Imperial Aunt, I bumped into Lu Yiran on the way here." The little fellow complained first. She rolled her eyes and said, "She kicked over a wooden bucket to embarrass me, but in the end, she got herself into big trouble." She had just finished speaking when Princess Kong stilled. Then she heard Lu Yiran's sharp cries and angry shouts from outside the front hall. "Arbor!" Willow was still drenched in water as he rushed in. His eyes were fixed on Arbor as he shouted, You! How dare you treat me like this? Mother!" Lu Yiran turned her head towards Princess Consort Kong and cried, "Arbor, shut up." Princess Consort Kong frowned and interrupted her unhappily. "Why are you directly calling the crown princess by her name? Where did all the rules you learned go? Don't get too close to the Xiong family in the future. That girl from the Xiong family isn't a good person either." Princess Consort Kong said coldly, she had no choice but to learn the habits of the marketplace. Her words and actions are unbearably vulgar. Lu Yiran looked at Princess Consort Kong and felt her heart turn cold. In the past, the Princess Consort was still somewhat amiable towards her, but ever since she had this crown princess as a comparison, the Princess Consort looked down on her even more. This was all this damned crown princess's fault. The little crown princess turned to glance at Lu Yiran and said with a humph, "Be more careful when you walk in the future. Don't like to kick over buckets for no reason. Buckets don't have eyes, and they might even bite back at their owner. Wouldn't the losses outweigh the gains? You. Lu Yiran pointed at Arbor and screamed repeatedly, You're too much of a bully." How could Princess Consort Kong not understand? This Lu Yiran asked for trouble and suffered the consequences of her own actions. Chapter 3303. She originally wanted to set up the little crown princess, but she ended up being set up instead. "Aren't you going back to your room to change?" Princess Consort Kong chided. Lu Yiran left in tears, wishing that she could stomp a few holes in the floor. "Jojo, I've embarrassed myself in front of you." Princess Consort Kong shook her head and couldn't help but sigh. Back then, wasn't it the old lady who insisted on shoving Lu Yiran to her, saying that she saw that she had no children and wanted her to raise a girl so that they could chat and relieve boredom? In the beginning, when they didn't have a close relationship, the Princess Consort thought that Lu Yiran was pretty good. Being cheerful and lively did relieve her boredom a lot, but once they got to know each other, Lu Yiran's petty nature was completely exposed. This matter couldn't be entirely blamed on her sister-in-law. After all, Lu Yiran was raised by the old lady since she was young. To be able to raise such a character, it could be seen that she was deeply influenced by the old lady. Princess Consort Kong pondered whether she should find a day to send Lu Yiran back to the Lu family. When her health improved in the future, she would be able to go out more often. With Lu Yiran's unpresentable appearance, it wouldn't be good to bring her out frequently, lest she embarrass the Prince Kong estate. But if she didn't bring her out every time, with Lu Yiran's petty nature, she wouldn't say anything even if she kept it in for the first or second time, but after the third or fourth time, she would definitely make a fuss. Imperial Aunt, what are you worried about? Arbor pulled down her hand that was supporting her forehead and picked up a pastry for her. It's delicious. Try it. Princess Consort Kong couldn't help but laugh and nodded. She had just picked up her chopsticks when she saw the doorkeeper stumble in anxiously as if he was being chased by a ghost. Oh no, oh no. Princess Consort, the old lady of the Lu family has brought people here to cause a ruckus. Princess Consort Kang's pupils contracted slightly. Her fingers that held the chopsticks tightly clenched, and an expression of disbelief hung on her face. That mother of hers actually brought people here to cause a ruckus. She was really vigorous despite her age. Sir Jojo jumped to the ground with a thump. He waved his hand and called out, Dan Ling, is everyone in the estate here? Dan Ling immediately nodded proudly. Yes, they're all waiting at the door. Follow me. Arbor waved his small hand and rushed out of the hall. Dan Ling immediately shouted. Together with the dozens of servants on her left and right, a group of people followed the little crown princess and ran away. Only Princess Consort Kong was left behind. She stared at the empty hall in bewilderment, speechless for a while. If they're all ordinary people, then you guys go. Don't worry about asking for compensation if you break it. Just hit them as hard as you can. Sir Jojo led more than 200 servants and rushed to the main entrance of Prince Kang's mansion. If there are any cultivators, leave them all to me. Yes. Open the door. Arbor waved his hand and more than 200 servants swarmed forward. Following which, the vermilion-red doors of the Prince Manor slowly opened to both sides. The old lady immediately appeared at the main entrance of the prince's mansion with 40 to 50 ferocious-looking men. A group of busybodies were hiding in a corner and watching from afar, not understanding what had happened. Looking at the situation, did someone come to Prince Kang's mansion to cause a ruckus? Oh, isn't this the young widow that was chased away by the prince's mansion yesterday? A passerby who had seen yesterday's drama called out. He was immediately surrounded by people asking for more information. Chapter 3304. Lu Lanxin was standing beside old lady Lu, sobbing and wiping her handkerchief. As soon as the gate of the mansion opened, Lu Lanxin quickly glanced inside. She was stunned by what she saw. Hundreds of servants and maids were standing at the gate of the mansion, all looking at them fiercely. Lu Lanxin's heart sank, and she subconsciously hid behind old Madame Lu. Was Lu Lanyun out of her mind? She didn't want to save the face of the mansion anymore, did she? Thinking of this, Lu Lanxin couldn't help but grit her teeth. Why was this damned woman so difficult to deal with now? Old Lady Lu was also shocked by the group of servants at the gate of the mansion. She quickly glanced at them, but she didn't see her eldest daughter, Lu Lanyun. She was even more surprised, and her eyes fell on Arbor, who was obviously the leader. Who are you? Where is my daughter? Where did you hide my daughter? Hurry up and find my daughter. I want to confront her face to face. Why did she treat her little sister like this? Did she abandon the Lu mansion and her family after becoming the princess? The little crown princess didn't pay attention to them at all. She waved her little fist and said, "Go. Go." Danling waved her arm, and all the servants and maids rushed at the people of the Lu mansion as if they had been injected with chicken blood. They didn't hit old lady Lu. Instead, they went around her, grabbed Lu Lanxin's bra, and slapped her twice without saying a word. Slap! Slap! Lu Lanxin, the little white flower, was instantly stunned by the two slaps. Little White Flower cried with tears in her eyes, "There is no law. There is no law." Slap! Slap! Two more slaps. No one knew who was so fierce, but Little White Flower was slapped so hard that she fell backward. The other servants swarmed up and attacked Lu Lanxin's son and daughter. Huang Yubao and Huang Wuxia were just ordinary people, and Huang Yubao was a useless playboy who didn't even have the strength to truss a chicken. How could he resist the ferocious attacks of everyone who was whipping him to death? After a round of attacks, Huang Yubao and Huang Wuxia were beaten until they cried out in pain. Huang Yubao stretched out his hand to resist the fierce attacks of the servants. He cried and shouted, "Stop! Stop! Ah! Ah! Io, you guys stop! Ah!" There were more than 200 servants and maids, and they were divided into 3 waves of attacks. Their cooperation was really good. After the first round of beating the Lu family members, another group of people went up, the cycle repeated, and the person who finished drawing the whip would be able to catch his breath while accumulating his strength. When the other 2 rounds were done, the person in the first round would be able to go up bravely again. The onlookers who were watching from afar were simply dumbfounded and tongue-tied. The passerby who had explained the situation earlier couldn't help but stutter, then it seems that the Wangwangfu has been merciful to that little widow yesterday. Today's attack was even more ferocious than yesterday's. The guards of the prince's mansion were like ferocious dragons out of their cages. Terrifying. Arbor stood aside and watched for a while. Then, he turned and walked into the mansion. Old Lady Lu was so angry that she was about to collapse to the ground, her body trembling uncontrollably. Looking at the messy crowd around her, she couldn't help but scream, You stop right there, stop right there." Arbor didn't bother to talk to her. He waved his hand and left. Chapter 3305. Halfway there, they ran into Princess Consort Kong, who was hurrying over. Arbor reached out to stop her. She pursed her lips and looked serious as she bombarded her with another round of brainwashing. "Princess Consort, you can't be like this. The reason the Lu family dares to act so recklessly is most likely because of your indulgence. You really have the same temperament as my mother." Arbor shook her head, her expression rueful. "With your soft and meek temperaments, how can you not be completely taken advantage of?" Princess Consort Kong didn't know whether to laugh or cry at her mischievous behavior. "I can't compare to your mother at all. Your mother is a prodigy with outstanding talent. I'm just a normal person, so I can't be associated with her at all." Arbor shook her head and wagged her finger as she said, "You're all the same, too good-tempered. I'm always bullied by some random people." That said, she expressionlessly sighed. "If you can learn a little from me, you won't be bullied again in the future." Princess Consort Kong, this child had to brag about her own awkwardness, and even glanced at her worriedly. That little look was truly adorable, making Princess Consort Kong burst out laughing. "Io, if I had such a cute daughter like you, I'd wake up laughing even in my dreams." Princess Consort Kong couldn't resist reaching out to pinch her little face. Arbor pulled her back to the antechamber. An hour later, Danling ran back with a grin on her face. She called out as soon as she entered, "Princess Consort, Crown Princess, they've all been chased away." "Well done." Arbor nodded, then turned to look at Princess Consort Kong and said, "Imperial Aunt, if they come to make trouble again in the future, just use this method and give them a good beating. I guarantee that within half a month, no one from the Lu family will dare to come to the Prince Estate's door. You'll definitely have a lot more peace and quiet." Princess Consort Kang's mouth twitched, and she hastily nodded. Then she looked at her suspiciously. This method wasn't planned by the old prince, was it? The more she looked at it, the more suspicious she became. If it wasn't arranged by the old prince, how could the hundreds of people in the prince's mansion all gather together so coincidentally? Arbor said expressionlessly, His Highness is someone who handles important matters in the court. Why would he be troubled by such trivial matters? Princess Consort Kong thought it made sense, so she nodded. I think that after this mess, they probably won't come to make trouble again in the next few days. She was afraid that there would be more rumors in the capital. Who knew how people would spread the word about the violence of Prince Kang's mansion? However, on the second and third days, the capital was calm and peaceful. There was no news at all. There was no rumor that was unfavorable to Prince Kang's mansion. The little crown princess stayed in the prince's residence for 3 consecutive days. Before the Lu family came to make a fuss again, Mu Jingfeng sent someone to rush her back. The moment she entered the Mu family's main hall, she saw Mu Jingfeng's sullen expression. Why do you keep going to the prince's residence to disturb others? It's better than staying here and looking at your dead face. Arbor's lips twitched. Throwing him an indifferent gaze, he casually walked to the old man's side and sat down. Jojo, I called you back today to ask you if you want to sign up for the family competition. The old man asked as he looked at her amiably. Heh, little niece's innate talent is exceptional. Presumably, she must want to sign up. Mu Jingxing's tone was a bit eccentric, and he even secretly peeked at Arbor as he spoke. What are the rewards? Chapter 3306. The elderly patriarch had long been familiar with this granddaughter's tricks, so he said with a smile, the rewards are naturally quite generous. The top 3 winners can go to Chaoyang Pavilion to receive a refined weapon that is at least a spirit weapon. Moreover, they will receive 1 million spirit coins, 500,000 spirit coins, and 100,000 spirit coins respectively. He glanced at his youngest granddaughter's face and inwardly thought, my youngest granddaughter probably won't take a fancy to this spirit coin reward. No expression could be discerned from the little stoic's face. Apart from this, you can also go to the spirit beast garden to pick a spirit beast you like and let a spirit beast trainer tame it for you. In the future, you can train with all of you. But the elderly patriarch coughed, his expression rather awkward. That Chaoyang Pavilion, cough, not everyone can enter. It depends on Ancestor's intentions. If Ancestor doesn't allow you to enter, cough, even if you win first place, you still won't be able to enter. What did he mean? The prize for the first place might turn into a cooked duck and fly away. The little fellow's small face immediately tensed up tightly. The elderly patriarch reflexively twitched his mouth when he saw her small expression, and he hastily added, but don't worry, even if you can't enter Chaoyang Pavilion, it's fine. At that time, the family will also consider compensating you. It wasn't that the little girl absolutely wanted the rewards inside Chaoyang Pavilion. She had recently plundered a lot of spirit weapons and the like, and a few drops every day were enough for her to play with. However, shouldn't what was supposed to be hers originally be hers? How could he say he would give it and then not give it? Wasn't this the behavior of a big swindler? What kind of place is Chaoyang Pavilion? Oh, that's the treasure trove set up by Chaoyang's ancestor. A round-faced young man at the side hurriedly interjected, only 1 in 1,000 people in the family can enter to choose the treasures. Most of them are directly ejected when they reach the entrance. They don't even have the chance to enter. The young man was called Mu Wuxia, the child born of 5th uncle's concubine. Arbor normally wasn't very close to the Mu family, and she might not even recognize many of the direct descendants in the family, let alone those born of concubines. Upon hearing this, Arbor only nodded and turned to ask the elderly patriarch, when is the competition? Grandpa's birthday is in 4 days. Old Master Mu strokes his beard and says with a smile, it's just a competition between the children of the family. Don't overdo it. Don't overdo it. Arbor nodded. Is there any other way to visit Chaoyang Tower? The old man was stunned for a moment before he nodded with a smile. Chaoyang Pavilion will only be open 1 month after this old man's birthday banquet. Indeed, this is the only way to get a chance to visit. Cough, ancestor doesn't like too many people. If more than 3 people go, those below the spirit realm will be repelled. In the past few years, there were still 30 to 50 people who could enter the Chaoyang Pavilion to choose treasures. Although not many people managed to obtain suitable treasures, they could still be considered as having visited the pavilion. But in recent years the ancestor's temper has worsened. Since the year before last, he has only allowed 3 people in. These 3 must be the most outstanding people in the family. Moreover, those who have entered once and selected a treasure will not have another chance to enter again. The little fellow pursed her lips, thinking that the ancestor's temper was quite bad. He also had a lot of bad habits and rules. Since that's the case, then let this lord go and meet him. Arbor nodded. Let's do it. Chapter 3307. The elderly patriarch laughed heartily and patted her small head. You agreed without even listening to me talk about the competition rules. Speak. Lady Qiao Qiao had a resolute look on her face. We are a talisman patrician family. The competition can only compare talismans and the purity of talisman energy. Cultivation, spiritual energy, and pills are all forbidden. The elderly patriarch asked with a grin, do you understand? The little stoic nodded expressionlessly, but she was inexplicably a bit excited in her heart. It was better than talismans. She loved competing with people in talismans the most. Additionally, the competition rules forbid the use of inner worlds and storage talismans. The talismans used in the competition must be drawn in the preliminaries and recorded by a specialist. The preliminaries are the day before the competition and will be supervised by your uncles. All the talismans drawn in the next 24 hours can be used in tomorrow's competition. Of course, you can find helpers to draw with you. After all, it was already pretty good for a normal person to draw 10 talismans in 24 hours. If they didn't find someone to draw with them, they probably wouldn't have enough talismans to use in the competition. Besides, there was also the problem of talisman formation rate. Even if one could draw 20 talismans in a day and use more than 10, the talisman formation rate was already pretty good. Helpers are allowed at most 2 people. These are the competition rules, the elderly patriarch said with a chuckle. Everyone has to compete to see who can draw for the others, Arbor said in confusion. But your eldest brother can help you. The round-faced Mu Wuxi couldn't resist interrupting, your eldest brother has already entered Morning Sun Pavilion, so it doesn't matter if he competes or not. However, your eldest brother helped Mu Rochuan draw last year. Unfortunately, even if Mu Rochuan won first place last year, she didn't have the fate to enter Morning Sun Pavilion. She was still ejected by Morning Sun Pavilion's ancestor in disdain, ha ha ha. Wuxi. Fifth uncle Mu Jingyang glared at him irritably. Mu Wuxi shrugged and stood to the side with his arms crossed in a sloppy manner. He muttered, aren't I speaking the truth? With Mu Xingqian helping Mu Rochuan draw talismans, it would be strange if Mu Rochuan didn't win. Unfortunately, she didn't have the fate to enter Morning Sun Pavilion. Instead, it benefited the third place, Mu Yuanyuan from the branch faction. She actually found a level 15 spiritual weapon in Morning Sun Pavilion. It was close to a divine artifact, so one could imagine how powerful it was. It wasn't that Mu Wuxi was being sarcastic. He was just joking when he said it. His vivid description made it feel like he was telling a story. He thought that it was funny that Miss Mu, who was so proud and arrogant, couldn't even compare to Mu Yuanyuan, who was from a branch family, even though she had won first place. Mu Wuxi couldn't help but laugh when he thought of her dark expression last year. This eldest miss was usually so arrogant, but didn't she stop at Chaoyang restaurant? Who said that ancestor Chaoyang had to look up to a genius? The ancestor obviously looked down on eldest young miss. Last year was just a small accident. Mu Roxuan's voice appeared at the entrance of the hall. Her elegant and proud figure stood in front of everyone. With a cold face, she walked towards old man Mu and glanced at Mu Wuxi with contempt. A piece of trash who didn't even enter the top 10 has the nerve to mock others. Mu Roxuan, what are you being so arrogant for? Mu Wuxi was furious and impulsively rushed towards her. Wuxi. Mu Jingyang stopped him with a warning look. Chapter 3308. That's exactly what I wanted to throw at you. Mu Roxuan coldly glanced at Mu Wuxi. What right do you have to be so arrogant in front of grandfather and uncles? In terms of seniority, I'm a few years older than you, and I'm your legitimate eldest sister from the eldest branch. In terms of aptitude, you're far inferior to me. Take back your sarcastic words and save your energy. Go back and cultivate properly. Mu Roxuan unceremoniously rebuked Mu Wuxi with a sharp gaze. A bastard from the 5th branch dared to bare his fangs and brandish his claws in front of her. Did he really think that she wouldn't dare to punish him? Mu Jingyang's face darkened, and he coldly sneered. Eldest brother, your daughter is quite impressive. She's really full of herself when she puts on airs. Mu Jingfeng's lips twitched with a fake smile, but he did not interrupt. Whenever he thought of how this girl had lied to him about everything after returning from the mystic realm, he felt very displeased. With this thought, his gaze landed on Arbor again. He recalled what Mu Roxuan said to him. Could this Arbor really draw teleportation talismans? Did Grandfather Mu know about this? There were many people here, and Mu Jingfeng wasn't stupid. He naturally wouldn't ask about Arbor in this kind of situation. He planned to have a heart-to-heart talk with his daughter after leaving Grandfather Mu's place. Grandfather Mu unhappily patted the armrest of his chair. Alright, stop fooling around. Wuxi, you can leave. Xian is right. She's your eldest sister, so don't go overboard with your words. Xian Wuxi is young. You have to be more tolerant of him. Don't be too calculative with him. After reprimanding Mu Wuxi, Grandfather Mu turned to look at Mu Roxuan with a frown. Yes, grandfather. Mu Roxuan did not refute this time. Instead, she obediently bowed and nodded. On the other hand, Mu Wuxi was impulsive. How could he hold back his anger? Fortunately, his father, Mu Jingyang, held him back. Otherwise, he would have rushed up and started a fight with Mu Roxuan. All right. Grandfather Mu looked at these good-for-nothings, and his head couldn't help but hurt a little. There's nothing else. You can all leave. Jojo, stay and talk to me. With Grandpa Mu's words, Mu Jingfeng, Mu Jingyang, and the rest had no choice but to retreat one by one. Before Mu Roxuan left, she coldly glanced at Arbor before walking out with her head held high. Mu Jingyang grabbed his son Mu Wuxi by the neck and brought him to a small path beside the garden. Mu Wuxi cried out, Hey, Dad, what are you doing? Father, be gentle. My neck, hey, my neck is going to break. Stinking brat. Mu Jingyang angrily slapped him on the head. How many times have I told you? Don't be too impulsive, just don't listen. Look at what you said in front of the old man. That bitch Mu Roxian's words weren't pleasant to hear either. Who was she pretending to be a saintess all day long? Last year, if it weren't for my stinky hands, I wouldn't have failed to break into the top 10 and been eliminated in one round. Those brothers from the side branches who aren't as talented as me all have better results than me. They even mocked me for an entire year. Enough. Mu Jingyang poked his son's head in exasperation. I don't even know who you take after with your impulsive personality. Chapter 3309. You don't know how to do things all day long and don't blame yourself for not finding the reason. Why don't you say that your skills aren't good enough and that you'll be brushed aside as soon as you meet a young lady? Then isn't she older than me? Mu Wuxi retorted indignantly. The father and son pair walked far away while cursing. Mu Jingfeng came out from behind the tree and coldly glanced at the father and son pair's departing figures. Then, he stood in place and specially waited for the little stoic. It wasn't until less than an hour later that Mu Jingfeng finally saw the little stoic coming out of the old man's courtyard. His face was gloomy, and he stepped forward to block her path. "I have something to say to you." "There's nothing to say between us." Arbor glanced at him coldly. He was disinclined to say anything else and directly walked past him. "Halt!" Mu Jingfeng was so angry that his face and neck were a bit red. "I'm asking you, do you know how to draw transportation talismans?" Arbor paused and turned to look at him. His eyes narrowed icily. "Mu Rochuan told you." "It doesn't matter who told me. You just have to tell me yes or no." Arbor snorted and rolled his eyes at him without hesitation. "It's none of your business." Mu Jingfeng was first angry, but then he was delighted. The little stoic didn't deny it, which meant that this matter was true. Mu Jingfeng couldn't help but become excited. As the family head of a talisman clan, he knew better than anyone how difficult it was to draw transportation talismans. His daughter could actually draw a transportation talisman that cost millions of spirit coins on the black market. What did this mean? It meant that Arbor knew how to draw transportation talismans. Mu Jingfeng couldn't help but become excited when he thought of this. His daughter actually knew how to draw transportation talismans that had disappeared for several hundred years. What an exciting piece of news this was. It had to be known that the method to draw transportation talismans had long been lost in the Talisman Patrician clan. The existing transportation talisman matrices were all left behind by the ancestors, and there were only a few left on the market. Once Mu Jingfeng thought about how he could grasp the method to draw transportation talismans, he would burst with joy. If that was the case, not only would his status in the Mu clan be raised a lot, he would also gain the support of more elders. Perhaps in the future, no one would be able to threaten his position as the patriarch. In addition, their Mu family's reputation would definitely rise to the next level. The entire Mu family would flourish in his hands, bringing unparalleled glory to their ancestors. Mu Jingfeng seemed to have foreseen the Mu family's future, and he was beaming with joy like a spring breeze. "Jojo, you're a daughter of the Mu family. Naturally, you have to think for the Mu family. The method of drawing the teleportation talisman is extremely important to my Mu clan. If you are willing, I'm not willing." Arbor's cold words were like a bucket of ice water that poured over Mu Jingfeng from head to toe, chilling him to the bone. Mu Jingfeng was incomparably enraged on the spot as he bellowed, "You! What did you say? Deafness needs to be treated." Arbor glanced at him, then turned around and walked towards Yulan Court. Not a single word would be wasted if they didn't see eye to eye. She really didn't know where he got the guts to actually think that Sir Jojo would tell him the method to draw transportation talismans. He. Even if she told the street cats and dogs, he wouldn't benefit from it. Save it. You're always deceiving yourself and others. Did you think that Sir Jojo would compromise like mother? Dream on. Chapter 33:10. Arbor, stop right there. Arbor, stop right there. Arbor. Mu Jingfeng's shout was louder than the previous one. He then rushed over in a flustered and exasperated manner to block her path. He looked like he was about to explode from anger as he coldly looked at Arbor and said, "Arbor, is this how you speak to your father?" Arbor curled his lips and looked at him coldly as he mocked, "Father?" Mu Jingfeng was agitated by his attitude and felt all the blood in his head rush to his head as his face flushed red. "Let me ask you, Rochuan said that the Sun Moon secret realm you guys went to collapsed. Is that true?" Arbor swept him a glance, feeling that his style of forcefully changing the topic was a little abrupt. However, the little fellow really wanted to know to what extent this person could continue to disgust people, so she calmly nodded. That's right. Rochuan said that before the secret realm collapsed, you packed up quite a lot of things inside, right? Arbor somewhat understood what he was going to say next and looked at him with raised brows. Don't tell me you want these cultivation resources. Snatch them from your daughter's hands. When Xiao Mu uttered the word, daughter, she was like a malicious spirit that had walked out from hell. Her pair of eyes that resembled icy pearls stared fixedly at the man in front of her, without a trace of human life from head to toe. Mu Jingfeng's bones abruptly turned cold from her gaze, and he was suddenly unable to respond. He hastily and awkwardly smiled at her. What are you talking about? I just wanted to remind you. Since you have so many cultivation resources by your side, you have to be more careful in the future. Otherwise, if you're accidentally discovered by someone with ulterior motives, you might attract some unnecessary trouble. His words were full of fatherly love, but what he got in return was Arbor's cold gaze that could drop dregs. Mu Jingfeng instantly felt his heart sink as he looked at his daughter gloomily. The little fellow's lips curled slightly as she calmly said, someone with ulterior motives? Is it someone as ambitious as you? If the things she placed in Paradise Planet could be snatched away, then there would be no safe place in this world. The conversation between the father and daughter only lasted for a few minutes, but they parted on bad terms. Not long after Arbor returned to the Yulon garden, he was invited to Madame Mu's gilded garden by two well-looking old nannies with a smile. When he entered, he saw that the young ladies and madams from the 2nd, 4th, and 5th branches were all present. At first glance, it really was a joyous and harmonious scene. The 4th branch's young lady, Mu Ro-chin, was a sweet-tempered, delicate, and sickly woman. When she saw Arbor, she stood up and bowed. Her voice was soft, so one had to get close to hear what she was saying. The 5th wife, Madame Hua, had been married to 5th uncle for many years but had not had any children. Mu Wuxia could be considered as a concubine's son raised by her. The 2nd branch's wife, Madame Chiu, and the 2nd branch's daughter, Mu Ruian, had met them once at New South Garden in Arbor, so he had some impressions of them. Arbor had interacted with the 1st branch's Madame Mu and those few troublesome young ladies quite often. Thus, when they met, they were all familiar faces. Jojo, you're here. Mu Qingya appeared to be in high spirits today, smiling very gently and amiably at Arbor. The 5th wife, Madame Hua, also smiled and said, Crown Princess, do you know how to play Madiao? Arbor calmly replied, I know a thing or two. Chapter 33:11. That's good. Madame Nehua giggled. Since we have nothing to do, we'll have to trouble the Crown Princess to play a few rounds with the ants. Very well. Sir Jojo had an indifferent expression on his face as he readily sat down on his seat. Mu Qingya shook her head with a smile. 2nd branch's Madame Ne Chiu and 5th branch's Madame Ne Hua quickly called out to her, eldest sister-in-law, let's play together for a while. I won't play. Mu Qingya shook her head and said, I get dizzy when I hit this. Madame Ne Chiu pursed her lips and muttered something in a low voice. Then, she grabbed a nanny next to her to play with her. That old nanny played with her 3 masters and was so frightened that she felt uncomfortable all over. It was as if there were needles poking her butt, and her body kept twisting here and there. Bam! Madame Nehua waved her hand with a grin. The little stoic was hit by Madame Nehua 3 times in a row and skipped 3 rounds, but she was still expressionless. Sorry. Madame Nehua covered her mouth with a handkerchief and giggled. 5th sister-in-law's luck is pretty good today. Madame Ne Chiu shot a stern look at the old nanny next to her. The other party shuddered in fright and hastily played a card that Madame Ne Chiu wanted. Madame Ne Chiu immediately received the card and heard the card in one go. She then picked another card in passing, and her eyes instantly lit up. The smile on her lips was almost unconcealable. All of them are right. I'm really sorry, everyone. I didn't expect to get off to a good start, it's not your turn to touch second ant yet. The little stoic reminded expressionlessly and then took the card from the stiff-faced Madame Nei Chio's hand. This card is mine. You can't be so shameless. Mu Qingya sat on the side and watched. When she heard this, she involuntarily coughed lightly and drank tea to hide her smile. Madame Nei Chio was stupefied. She recalled her hand speed just now. It seemed like she stole a card. It was fine, it was fine. She heard it so early, so it would definitely be her turn. A 9 lotus lantern, thank you. 88,000 spirit coins per card. The little stoic pushed the card and extended her slender hand. What? The young crown prince consort also wanted the card that she wanted. She even picked a 9 lotus lantern, fuck. She only knew a little. You must be lying. Madame Hua and Madame Chio were dumbfounded. The old nanny was so frightened that she fell off the stool. Get up. Madame Chio shouted angrily. I'll pay for your share. What are you afraid of? This is just the beginning. The next 8 rounds were like this, tubular 9 lotus lantern. Thank you. 88 spirit coins for each. 1,000 colored 9 lotus lanterns. Thank you. 88 spirit coins for each. After 13 rounds, Crown Prince Mo trod on the afterglow of the setting sun to pick up his wifey, who was playing exceedingly happily. As soon as he stepped through the gate of the gilded garden, he was stunned to see Madame Chio and Madame Hua pouncing on him. They threw themselves at his feet and cried, Your Highness, quickly take your crown princess back. It was their fault for being so arrogant. They had thought that the little crown princess was young and easy to trick, so they had teamed up to trick her. Who knew what a terrible price to pay? The little crown princess looked at them expressionlessly and said to Kai Xiu, Give the bill to the 2 madams. It's the crown princess. Kai Xiu stifled a belly full of laughter, and the corner of her mouth kept twitching as she walked forward. She deftly handed the bill to the 2 madams who were crying miserably. Thanks to the 2 ants' care, this crown princess had a great time playing today. Let's play together again next time. The little crown princess nodded politely at the 2 of them. She stood up and pattered to her husband's side, naturally holding his hand. Let's go home.